gosh. Oh, hamstring. Up. Sniper, take the other picture.
Yeah, I mean, that's how you can formulate opinions without having true facts.
I'm telling you, think about it logically for just a second.
Dear Reds fans, welcome back to the Zebra Zillionaires. It was a tough one yesterday.
Live from Chatterbox Sports Studios, it's Off the Bench with Tom Brenneman.
Well, good morning, good morning, good morning. I'm in that part of the year where I have zero clue what day it is. Like, I just thought of saying, like, hey, have a great Thursday morning, which I think that's what it is, but I genuinely wasn't 100% sure, so I stuttered there for half a second, and I just thought I'd come clean and tell you. But good morning. This is Off the Bench, presented by United Dairy Farmers. I'm Trace Fowler, joined by the host of characters as usual, and we are thankful that you tuned in. Now, usually we have a nice little maybe monologue or something that we talk about, but today we have a smorgasbord of topics. Now, I've heard that word used my whole life. I got to be honest. I have never really known what that word meant. I just decided, you know what, I'll look that up. So for those that don't know, it is a buffet offering of a variety of hot and cold meats, salads, and hors d'oeuvres. Never in my life have I ever maybe seen a smorgasbord, which I don't even know if I'm saying the word right. But if you ever done that in life, I've done it a lot. I've heard a word used, I've heard a word used, I've heard a word used, and I'm like, I think I know the meaning of this word. I have no idea what the definition is, but I'll just continue to use it in the same context everyone else in my life has used it, and I think it'll get me by. Kind of like farther ado.
What's the etymology of smorgasbord?
I don't know. We're getting deep into the weeds here. What is it?
Swedish. It is a Swedish word.
Okay.
Smorgasbord.
Yeah. Smorgasbord.
You said the word better than I thought you were going to say it. I saw it typed out there. I gave you a 0.0% chance you'd read that word.
Smorgasbord. Right. Who knows? Anyways, usually we talk about sports on the monologue, but there really wasn't any sports last night outside of Caitlin Clark. Shout out to her. I did see that she made a big-time shot, and she's a big-time player. She's fun to watch. If you've not seen her, like I said before, you give yourself a chance to watch play, and she'll probably entertain you. But that's here nor there. There are other topics to discuss. As a part of the smorgasbord, we have NFL playoff scenarios. What's more likely? Do we believe in the Bills, or do we believe in the Dolphins, or neither? Who knows? We'll find out together. I'm sure that we'll have a lengthy debate on which is fraud and which is for real. We have buy or sell, which goes hand in hand there. We have Frankie Montas. We did not get to him yesterday because obviously the world of sports demanded us to talk about football. Maybe we'll sneak that in. Nick Kirby joins us at 11 o'clock. We have picks that I did not make, but I'll be interested to see. I'm sure Elliot probably won based off of the previous knowledge of who he liked in bowl games. We have Mailbag. We have some kids around. They're back in school. They were a little slow on the trigger of sending those in, Elliot, but I think the teachers got them back in shape, and they're sending them in droves once again. But, as always, we got a couple hours to discuss the world of sports. We have Elliot, Reed, and Casey McAllister. Gentlemen, this is one of those days where I don't know exactly what this show has in store. I don't know where we'll eventually, at some point, we're going to go off the rails. That's what happens, and that's how it continues to happen. It is not planned. These things aren't planned. I hope today I don't sit here and scream and yell into a microphone about how Jesse Bates is a pretty damn good player, and maybe you want to keep him, but who knows? Maybe we'll start arguing about something else. But before we go around the room, I asked the question at the top of the monologue. We'll do a quick, not buy or sell. I want you to pick one or the other. Who do you believe in more? Do you believe in the Bills, or do you believe in the Dolphins, who have shown maybe more promise or a higher ceiling per se, throughout this year? We'll start with you, Elliot.
Without question, it's the Buffalo Bills. The Buffalo Bills have the higher ceiling. Now,
Right.
I do think there is a testament to the way the Dolphins play football, that if Tyreek Hill is healthy and he missed a couple snaps against the Ravens, he was down a couple drives. If he's able to stay healthy, they can score at will. They can score at will. And I know Mostert wasn't healthy either against the Ravens. So once he is back, once him and Achane are running tandem at the running back position, I do think the Dolphins are a good team. Saying that, the Bills are just better. They're not even throwing to Stephon Diggs. They're not even utilizing the wide receiving room like the way it was intended or the way that people thought it was going to be used. Saying that, their defense is playing well as of late. I thought Josh Allen has been playing well as of late. The turnovers seem to have gone down. I think the Bills are a damn good football team. And I think if you let them get hot in the playoffs, they will go to a Super Bowl. If there was ever a year for the Buffalo Bills to go to a Super Bowl, it's this year when it seems like the entire AFC is down. And I do think Reed laughs at the point. I'll say it over and over again. This is the most wide open the playoffs have ever been. The most wide open the AFC playoffs have ever been. This is the Bills' year. If, and again, which is the craziest part of all of it, if they lose and a couple other teams win, they're not even in the playoffs. So, yeah, but I do think the Bills have the higher ceiling.
The sentence that you think the AFC is down when there is a chance in which 9 teams in the AFC win 10 games.
Didn't say down. I said wide open.
You did say down. And then you clarified and said, and then you said it's as wide open as it ever is. You said the rest of the AFC seems a bit down. But I digress. Listen, the Buffalo Bills were 6-5, and I remember one of our bosses, Sean Spurlock, telling me that they're not going to make the postseason. Have you seen their look ahead? Well, they've won 5 of 6, and they still might miss the postseason. But if they win, they're the 2 seed. And to say that the Fins have a higher ceiling than the Bills, I don't believe that necessarily. I think the Bills have maybe the highest ceiling in the NFL, certainly up there. So I much believe in the Bills, Buffalo Bills.
With the loss to Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb, their 2 best edge rushers, there's just not a scenario in my head where I think this Miami Dolphins defense can contain the Buffalo Bills despite being a top 10 defense since they've got the corner. I can't remember his name off the top of my head. One of the best corners in the NFL. Yeah, I just think the Buffalo Bills have a way higher ceiling in this game. And I just looked at the history. Buffalo dominates Miami. I mean,
as of recently, sure.
The last 10 games, they're 9-1 against Miami.
Yeah, it's
and
not close.
The one loss was that 19-21 loss in Miami where that viral video, the coach slamming his crap and shifting it everywhere.
Nice job, Casey. Good job.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like they should have won that game too. Like they were driving down the field. All they had to do is kick a field goal, and the guy doesn't get down or out of bounds in time, and so they end up losing that game. So that being said, I think Buffalo has a really good chance of winning the division and being the 2nd seed. I don't think they're a wild card team. I really don't. I think they're a better team than Miami.
For what it's worth,
It's worth a lot.
For what it's worth, the Miami Dolphins just got embarrassed, absolutely embarrassed, and I do think they have a great coach. I don't know if you've been watching Hard Knocks, but it's been a great watch. I do believe in Mike McDaniels. It's just I think the Bills are a little better. Like this is a game in which the Dolphins should show up for. They just got embarrassed. Their backs against the wall to win the division, a division that they should have wrapped up a couple weeks ago, but they haven't. So I mean, we'll see what happens.
It's just tough to overcome the injuries at edge rusher. Like those 2 guys are vital. Like losing Jalen Phillips already took a hit for them. Losing Bradley Chubb is like a whole nother can of worms for them. I'm not surprised they got blown out after losing Bradley Chubb.
The Dolphins have had 2 very emotional weeks.
Yeah.
Like 2 weeks ago they beat the Cowboys, and they're like, put some respect on our names. We aren't frauds. We're for real. And what do? They followed up by losing by 40. By
a real team.
40. So those are 2 emotional weeks. Will they bounce back?
The NFL is a situation, though, where I don't know how much stock you put in just 1 week. You have a situation, you can see it all year long about how teams bounce back after they've been humiliated. I mean, the Broncos, for all intents and purposes, maybe they had the most humiliating loss in the history of the NFL. They lost 70-20 in a football game in the National Football League, and they've turned around and they are sitting at 8-8 with a chance to go 9-8. And obviously, the AFC has so many teams that are sitting around the 9-10 wins where the Broncos really haven't been talked about a whole lot. But if you win more games than you lose in the NFL, I mean, it's hard for me to say that's not a good season. So I'm not going to sit here and say that the Dolphins, for all intents and purposes, don't have a high ceiling. And I don't know where this Bills respect always comes from. That's where I'm not saying you guys lose me with the Bills, but the Bills always find a way to not get the job done. Has there been a franchise that has done less and gotten more respect in the last 5 years than the Bills? I don't know. I mean, at least with the Burrow talk and the Bengals talk, from time they've gotten to the Super Bowl. And yes, people are going to point to that Kansas City game and say, well, it was kind of a fluke scenario where you got the Chiefs who just pulled off a miracle and they beat them. Otherwise, we'd be talking about the Bills and then maybe they wouldn't have won a Super Bowl. Maybe, but they played the games and they didn't win. So I'm not going to say that the Bills' ceiling is higher than the Dolphins, but I get the concept and I get the understanding. I think we're all saying, in a roundabout way, maybe I'll be wrong, but I think we're all saying that they're both somewhat frauds. I don't see either one of those teams making the Super Bowl because they have to go through Baltimore at some point, and that begs the inevitable question. Is this just an arms race for two teams to get to the Super Bowl, and is there any chance that either one of them gets knocked off? That'll kind of lead us in here to this playoff scenarios and where people are going to stand and what the situations look like. But you have to ask yourself, when you look into the playoffs, I don't know what's important anymore. For a long time, I thought home field advantage was important. I thought getting a bye was really important. And certainly the Kansas City Chiefs have kind of made that proven that is a thing. But I go back to my fandom. I can tell you this, the Green Bay Packers have shown that it's not. There's been multiple times where the Green Bay Packers were the number one seed, had home field advantage, and then, measly old New York Giants come in and they win. Or Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. There's no way they can go into the frozen tundra of Orlando. They came up. They won. In fact, the only Super Bowl that the Packers won in my lifetime when I've watched is when they were a wild card team and they went on the road 3 straight times and they went to Super Bowl and won. So I don't know what it is to believe. The Bengals are a good example of that. They went to the Super Bowl, and quite frankly, they had to go on the road twice through 2 top division opponents. So how important is home field advantage? I don't know. Health seems to be and continues to be to me. And I guess it's luck. What else could you attribute it to? That seems to be the number one most important thing there is when all is said and done. I don't care where you're playing, what time you're playing, almost who you're playing, but are you healthy? And Casey just illustrated it beautifully as to why the Dolphins probably have found themselves in a hole that they're not going to be able to get themselves out of, because if you can't pressure the quarterback, you just can't win a Super Bowl. You cannot win a Super Bowl if you can't get to the quarterback. All right. There's a situation here where Casey's going to put up, we have kind of our playoff scenarios. We have a multitude of different factors that can obviously happen on Sunday. Which ones are more apparent than others? I don't know. That's why they play the games. But the one that's the most intriguing is the one that we led the show off with, which is Miami and Buffalo. Because if it were to be Miami that were to win that football game, the Bills find themselves with a chance, an outside chance at that, but to find themselves outside the playoffs. If the Bills, who are favored by 3, win, well, they not only make the playoffs, but they're the 2 seed. In a division that you could argue, I could see, and maybe you guys could correct me if I'm wrong, I can see Baltimore losing a game in which if they have to go up against the Browns. Because for some reason, styles make fights in the NFL. And I have a feeling the Browns are going to muddy up a football game about as much as you can muddy up one. Do I believe in Joe Flacco? Do I believe in the Browns? Not wholeheartedly. But I do think they can play spoiler. Is there anyone in the room that actually thinks that, no, we'll play this game? What team outside of the 2 teams that I just named that are more than likely, and I look at the playoff odds or the Super Bowl odds, for those that aren't sure what the odds are, you have the 49ers who are the favorite to win the Super Bowl at plus 210, which is kind of crazy, if we're being honest.
Yep.
I mean, to win a Super Bowl, And that's we all know how hard that is. But plus 210, that's basically what almost Washington is this Monday. Now they're not quite plus 210, but hopefully you get my point. And then you sit right behind them. The Ravens are right behind them at plus 350. Do you want to take a guess on who the one is after that if you've not cheated and looked?
If I had to guess, I would say the third team is probably the Kansas City Chiefs.
Okay. Elliot?
I would vote the third team is the Buffalo Bills.
I would say if it's not those two teams, it's probably the Eagles.
Believe it or not,
Is it the Cowboys?
the Buffalo Bills are third.
Oh,
Yep.
okay.
They are plus 800, though, is my point. You have two teams that have such a clear, distinctive psychological, if you want to call it that, or what the public perceives to be so much better than everyone else. And they don't perceive them to be. They are. The question is, will they choke it away? I don't know. But is there one team outside of those two that you actually believe can win the Super Bowl? Not get to the Super Bowl, actually win the Super Bowl if they had to face either the Ravens and or the Bills. Or excuse me, and or the Niners.
I look around the NFL right now, and I'm telling you, when I close my eyes, I'm going to close my eyes, and I'm going to try to picture who hoists up the Lombardi Trophy. I can't see Brock Purdy doing it. I can't do it. There's no scenario where I can see that guy holding up that trophy. They can get to the Super Bowl. They can do whatever Jimmy Garoppolo did. But I don't think they're going to win it. I really don't. If I look at Lamar Jackson has been the MVP frontrunner. I would argue it's been the most lopsided MVP race maybe in the past 10 years. I'm going to have to double check that because I'm sure I'm wrong, like I always am. But Lamar Jackson in the playoffs, again, he hasn't been good. That's not my opinion. That's statistics. That's factual. He has not been good in the postseason. So that's another team, the top two, that I don't really trust to get to a Super Bowl. Outside of that, I do think the Bills, despite everything, they have an offense, they have a decent defense. I think they could go. I do think my take that I made, a couple months ago, that the Cleveland Browns might win a couple playoff games is going to come true. I think the Cleveland Browns have a decent. If there was ever a chance for the Cleveland Browns to make some relevant noise in the postseason, it is this year. I think the Cleveland Browns will compete for an AFC Championship game. I'm going to stand by that take. I'm going to ride that take. Now, the NFC side, I don't know. The NFC side, I think, as of right now, it's looking like it's going to be the 49ers for sure in the NFC Championship game. But my sleeper over there is the Los Angeles Rams. I think everybody wrote off the Rams. Sean McVay, he went all in for the Super Bowl. They haven't been great since. But this year, again, on the back of Puka Nacua, they've been phenomenal. I think the Rams might make some noise. Now, their one flaw is that they can never beat, what's his name, in San Francisco, head coach.
Mike McDaniel, or Kyle Shanahan.
Shanahan. They can't beat Shanahan. But if Shanahan loses early, they're not going to have to play him, hopefully. I don't know. Again, we'll see if the seeding works. They might have to play him first. Or second. We'll see. My point is, I do think there are a ton of other teams that can win a Super Bowl this year. A ton of other teams.
You think there's a ton of other teams that can win the Super Bowl outside of those two?
Yes. In the AFC.
Name them.
Okay. All right. In the AFC, I do think, let's see. I think.
You want me to give you a list?
No. Let me do them off the top of my head. I think the Dolphins could. I think the Bills could. I think the Ravens could. I think the Browns could. Who are the other three I'm missing?
Jacksonville.
They cannot.
Chiefs.
Colts.
Chiefs can. That's 5 over there. On the other side, the Lions cannot, but the Eagles can. I do think the Cowboys can. I do think the Rams can. I think the 49ers can.
Okay.
I think that's 9 teams.
Are we sleeping? I'm spoiling a.
Go ahead.
I'm spoiling a buy or sell for later in the show, but are we sleeping on what's happening with the Philadelphia Eagles? They've lost 4 of 5.
Yeah, they haven't been good.
They were 11-1, and they're probably not gonna win their division. Like, they're gonna be the 5 seed. So, like, everyone calls me.
They're gonna play Tampa, or they're gonna
right.
play.
They're gonna win that. They'll probably win that. But like this Phillies defense is not good. It's not good. That was the whole thing of their defense was their defense. How great their defense was. How do you score points on this team? And this year, it's a bottom third of the league defense. And if they have to go into Tampa Bay, like, this sounds crazy, but could you see Baker Mayfield kind of shredding up the Phillies? I don't know. Or the Phillies. The Eagles? At home? I'm just putting that on your plate. I'm not saying it's going to happen. I'm just going to put that so that in 3 weeks, if it happens, I can be like, hey, you remember when I said that? Remember, I'm so smart. But
I can't see it. But I'll tell you what, I'm not going to write off Baker. I'm not going to write off the fighting Baker Mayfield.
Once again, I don't think it's likely to happen.
They did look horrible against the Saints.
I don't think it's likely to happen, but I just wanted to throw it out in the open air so I can claim that I said it. Everyone is so hard on the Kansas City Chiefs, and I understand why. Their offense looks abysmal, and that's been their calling card over the past few years, is how good their offense looks.
We need to get you in therapy.
But they still got a top 5 defense.
No, we need to get you to
The
therapy.
Eagles are the same thing. The Eagles are going through the exact same pains that the Kansas City Chiefs are going through right now.
Well,
the exact same pains.
Eagles can score, though.
Can't stop people, and that was their calling card, was how good their defense was. It's the same things. Like, the teams have flipped. Now Kansas City has a stout defense, and now the Eagles have a great offense.
The thing is, though, is you got to look at the scenarios of how you got to get to where you got to get and what you have to do to get to the Super Bowl. And I look at the Chiefs, and again, I guess I'm trying to rub away the hatred that I have for the Kansas City Chiefs to a certain extent, because we've already gone over this. I'm sick and tired of hearing about Patrick Mahomes, and I'm sick and tired of hearing about how they're so damn good and this, that, and the other. And they've been very, very, very fortunate. And you know what they say, fortune favors the bold, and congratulations to them. Maybe they've created their own luck. But I feel like there's been a lot of fortunate things that have happened for the Kansas City Chiefs, and I think they've been put on a pedestal from time to time around here. Not here, but just in the NFL talk as a whole. The thing is the Chiefs are going to have to go, if everything plays out the way we think it will, okay, and let's just say Miami wins this weekend, which I think Miami, for whatever weird reason, might do that. And things
Miami very easily could win this weekend. Yeah.
Buffalo would find themselves on the road in Kansas City. So let's just say this is the toughest road there would be to get to the Super Bowl for the Kansas City Chiefs. They would probably have to play Buffalo. Mm-hmm. They would then have to turn around and they would have to beat the Browns.
Or Baltimore, right?
Well, they're the 3rd seed. I mean, do you think I guess you could say they would have to play. They would have to play
Dolphins
Baltimore.
Win their first game. Yeah.
They would have to play Baltimore if we think Jacksonville are going to beat the Browns. Do we think Jacksonville is going to beat the Browns?
Oh, my bad. Sorry.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
That's not happening. Well, I'm not saying it's not happening, but my point is this would be the toughest. Let me just phrase this. This would be the toughest road there would be to get to the Super Bowl, in my opinion, of every other team in the NFL. Right. They would have to beat the Buffalo Bills, okay, at home, mind you. That's fair. They're at home, Kansas City, Arrowhead. Congratulations.
And they'd either have to.
They would then have to turn around. They would have to beat the Browns. Okay. Then after that, they would have to probably beat Baltimore.
That's a tough road.
That's
wide open over there.
3 really difficult games. And honestly, from an odds maker standpoint, I don't believe that the odds makers think the Chiefs are statistically that far off of trying to get the Super Bowl. It's just that when they look at the statistical chance of them getting through those 3 opponents, it makes it much more difficult to convince yourself that they're going to beat the Buffalo Bills, they're going to beat the Cleveland Browns, they're going to beat the Baltimore Ravens, and then they're going to turn around and win the Super Bowl over the San Francisco 49ers and the Eagles. Like, they would have to win all those games in consecutive order. And what I would say, the final thing I would say about it, is I had mentioned at the top of the show, health is the most important thing. I'm not suggesting for a second that I can guarantee you an injury would happen in that. But if you go through the Bills, the Browns, and the Ravens, and you don't have any major injuries, congratulations. That is a minor miracle in and of itself. It's one thing when you play against we call them finesse teams, but those 3 teams aren't going to be finesse at all. So that's where I don't want to buy the Chiefs, and I'm not trying to be a hater.
I don't think the Chiefs are gonna win the Super Bowl. I don't think they're gonna win the AFC Championship. I don't think that. I was just bringing up the point is everyone has been has talked about how terrible the Chiefs look, and no one, not a single person, has brought up what is going on in Philadelphia, and I think they're very similar stories. To push back on what you said earlier about why you don't understand why the Buffalo Bills get put on such a pedestal, who has won more games over the past 3 seasons than the Buffalo Bills, including playoff games?
Well, like the Cowboys, how come the Cowboys get the rap they do, but the Buffalo Bills don't?
Well, the Buffalo Bills have won 4 playoff games in the last 3 years.
But they have not even been to the Super Bowl.
They've won 4 playoff games. The Cowboys have won 1.
Yeah, the Cowboys.
One.
Cowboys are number 1 fraudulent team.
1.
They're the number 1.
Lamar Jackson gets a rap for how bad he's played in the postseason. He's won a playoff game. He's basically the Cowboys. That's why the Bills have won 4 playoff games.
The Cowboys have also played really tight football games, and they've lost to teams that have made runs. So
Who do the Bills lose to? The Bills lost on a 13-second play from Patrick Mahomes a couple years ago.
Yeah,
and then in 2 years, in the year before that, they lost to the champions, right? The Chiefs?
Lost to us. We went to the championship.
Now,
what are you
kicked their
talking
tail.
about?
We kicked their
You
tail.
marked that as the Cincinnati's number 1 timeout. Let's just let's
I'm saying 2 out of the last 3. I'm
recap
saying
what
2
just
out of the last
happened,
3.
everybody. Let's everyone recap what just happened. Reed Mouse sat up here, sat right there in that seat about 6 months ago, and was yelling about how that 12-game winning streak, blah blah blah. That wasn't even close to what the Cincinnati Bengals did up in Buffalo. And this man just forgot. He just forgot that the Bills lost to the Bengals.
I didn't forget it
at home.
I didn't forget it. I just left it out of the narrative because it didn't fit what I was trying to say. What are you talking about here? I mean, what are you talking about? I didn't forget it. But for what it's worth, like they've won 4
Worth a
playoff
lot.
games. They went to the AFC Championship 3 years ago, lost to the Chiefs. They lost to the Chiefs in 2021 in overtime. Didn't even get the ball right. They changed the rule because of that. So all these things considered, like they have been probably the third most successful team in the NFL over the past 3 years. So that's why they get put on a pedestal. 13-win seasons, 2 out of the last 3 years. If they win on Sunday, they have won their division for the 4th consecutive year.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Casey.
That and Josh Allen has scored the most since entering the league. And he has the best turnover differential out of that, too. I know people want to talk about that, but he has the best differential in the league as well. So that's why they get put on a pedestal. The dude is electric. Their offense is insane. Whether you like that or not, I mean, Reed's right. They've actually won multiple playoff games.
4. I think only the Bengals and the Chiefs have won more.
Yeah,
over the past 3 years.
I think of like the Cowboys, and they've lost to.
What?
They've lost to Cowboys.
Cowboys
also,
lost to the 49ers twice.
This isn't about the Cowboys. The Cowboys don't deserve the flack that they get. That's a fact. That's a fact.
That's
they
fair.
they deserve
That's
to be on a
fair.
pedestal just with the Bills, just along with the Bills. But it's not. There is a difference, though, I think. Because
You know what I think the Cowboys faced a little bit similar to what the Bengals had for quite some time is there is a monkey on the proverbial back, right? Like there is no doubt that there's a psychological edge or a psychological hurdle, whatever term you would like to use, that they have to finally get over. They're good enough to do it. I genuinely believe that the Cowboys are good enough to win the Super Bowl. They can do that. The issue comes down to the fact that if it's a close game in the fourth quarter, they are the team that's never been able to do it. They're the opposite of what I talked about Alabama being the other day. It's like Alabama expects and believes, no matter whether they're the better team or not, it doesn't matter. They believe deep down they are going to win the football game. The Bengals were that way for a long time, right? We knew what we felt like when the Bengals were playing before the Raiders game. And just because they beat the Raiders, did it suddenly spark something in the Bengals that made them a significantly better football team? I don't believe it did. But this is the psychological and this is the emotion. This is why we like sports, is because humans play it. But for some reason, if you can get over that proverbial hump, it releases some demons and you can just go play free. And the next thing you know, you find yourself in the Super Bowl like the Bengals did. Now, again, you keep running into this wall time and time and time again. Eventually, there's going to be a push comes a shove, and you're going to have to get over the hump. This is the hurdle for the Cowboys. Let's be clear. This is the year. If they don't do it
they look
this
better
year,
this year. Yeah,
if they don't do it this year, they're going to find themselves in a position where it's only going to get louder and louder and louder, and we know a lot about the NFL, and it's a not-for-long league, and I don't know how long the Cowboys can keep sustaining themselves to be this good of a football team. And give the Cowboys credit. I mean, I really do mean that. They've had some unfortunate things happen to them. We all know that the Tony Romo play to Dez Bryant, I mean, I'm a Packer fan. We all know that's a catch. We all know that's a catch. We all know that that's a touchdown. But unfortunately, the rules in the NFL sometimes, we don't want to get into officiating today, but by God, you want to talk about a major crisis we've not talked about on this show? It's NFL officiating. We haven't even discussed what happened in Detroit, which has been talked about numerous times elsewhere, so maybe we won't spend time on it. But you get my point. There's things that happen that you measly forget really quickly, and the narrative can change just like that. Right? And I'm not trying to go down the rabbit's hole here, but how many narratives would change just off of one or two different things that happened that had nothing to do with whoever it is that happened to? Tom Brady's career in and of itself is a microcosm of what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
You have the fumble play against the Raiders. If you have, and I get ifs, ands, and buts. We do this all the time. Well, Trace, it didn't happen, blah, blah, blah. My point is that Tom Brady had nothing to do with a ton of plays that required him to win or not win. Now, he, of course, made plays to allow his team to win, yes. But he was down 28-3 in a Super Bowl. And, yes, he came back. But do you realize what the defense has to do on the other side of the ball for you to even get a semi-chance to come back when you're down 28-3? And we build these narratives up all the time. My point about what I'm trying to say is I think the Cowboys have had some unfortunate breaks go against them. And yeah, some of it's their own self-inflicted wounds. They decide they want to throw a pass down the middle of the field with 11 seconds to go in a game, and they try to go up and spike the football to give themselves a chance to win the game, and they run out of time. Last year, they go up against a damn good football team in the 49ers. And you can say whatever you want, but they were in that football game, and then their running back, who is a vital part of their offense, breaks his foot. So
Tony Romo muff snap.
And you know what? Tony Romo's another guy. If he had a defense, his narrative of what his career would have been completely different. Go back and look at what Tony Romo's stats and what he did were. Hell, he's better than, in my opinion, he's better than Dak Prescott ever thought about being. But it depends on where you're at and who you are, and it also depends on what happens. If Josh Allen lays another egg, okay, in the AFC Championship games and throws 3 interceptions, it's the same thing we talked about yesterday about the Michigan Wolverines and J.J. McCarthy. The narrative of Josh Allen is going to be significantly different than if he wins a Super Bowl. And maybe it should be that way. But I'm just cautioning all of us to sit here and say, hey, just because XYZ happened in the past, they can't possibly do it. I think in my heart of hearts, if you put me up against the wall,
that works for everyone, right? Not just the Cowboys. It works for the Bills. It works for the Ravens. Works for everyone.
It does, but I think that the Cowboys are the ones that get beat down the most because they have a national brand, and there's
correct.
They're
the Yankees.
There's a part of that. Yes,
that's it. You compared them to what the Bengals have gone through. I think it's closer to what like the Yankees are going through. Yankees have been to one World Series in 20 years. That's closer to what the Cowboys, because they're the biggest brand in the sport. So people like to punch down because they're at the top and we're tired of hearing about them. Same reason that you guys don't like hearing about the Bills and the Chiefs and everyone else.
The Chiefs this year, I would be shocked if they made it. Maybe even out of the first round.
We all would.
I know that the first round is a heavy punch. I think I hate to say this because then you're going to eat your own words. And some of this is maybe partial bias and hatred. I think the Chiefs stink. I really do. I don't think that there's one thing you can convince me about that they do unbelievably well that would tell me that they have any chance in hell in the playoffs.
They got, the third best scoring defense?
I understand. But they have one of the world's worst offenses. And that includes what many say the best quarterback is in the game. And I'm not suggesting that he's not. I'm just saying that if you have the world's best quarterback and you still look that atrocious, it's tough to convince me that you're going to be able to carry that all the way through. All right. Jumping over to the other side really quickly. The only pushback I have on something that hasn't been talked about is I think the Lions, again, based off of their previous history and the narratives that are out there about the Detroit Lions, if it wasn't the Lions and and maybe this matters, that's another debate. I don't know if this matters or not. It's fair to say that it does. But if you took the Lions roster, okay, and you swapped it with the Green Bay Packers, I think that the Lions roster would be getting more respect right now. There would be a narrative that the Packers have a chance to win the Super Bowl. Certainly. And I don't think for one second that the Lions should be just written off. I do think the Lions have a puncher's chance. They went. Now this gets us back into our scenario. Did Decker report? Did he report the right way? Who knows? Who gives a rat's tail? Like, well, at some point, some of these rules, it's like, how about this? Just because you're wearing a number that's not traditional, if you line up the right way to be an eligible receiver, then just be an eligible receiver. Mm-hmm. Like, I get the idea of like, well, he's reporting as an eligible receiver, so the defense knows that guy that's wearing number 74 could be a receiver. Well, if they line up in a way, in a manner in which is legal, and it allows them to be an eligible receiver at the end of the line, then maybe they should just be an eligible receiver. Why do we have to rely on some white hat telling everybody? Do you think the defense isn't even, like, maybe I'm completely wrong about this, and I will stand up and say I've never played a down of football on the defensive side in my life, especially at any reasonable level. My point is that, are they listening in the crowd? Is Micah Parsons listening to the PA announcer that says, oh, 74 is reported eligible, and then all of a sudden now it makes a world of difference, or am I being an idiot for that, Casey?
The refs do talk to the players before it goes on the PA, but my biggest gripe about that whole situation is we got cameras on the refs at this point. Like, did we seriously not have any evidence whatsoever that the guy went up and talked to the ref? Like, at all?
Body cams on the refs. Casey said it first.
I mean, no, that's seriously a thing, though. Like, some of the refs have body cams, and if that's not the ref that is in charge of being the guy that you go to, then what are we doing? Like, that's already... The whole situation could have been avoided is what I'm getting at. Yeah, and it's just dumb.
I'll be honest. I was at a rehearsal dinner when this whole thing happened. We were on our way to the casino. We're in our Uber. Everyone starts cheering because we all got the Lions money line. We get into the casino, and we see they're still running plays, and we're like, what the hell happened? We just watched them win. So I still don't comprehend fully what happened.
And there's still video evidence of the guy going up and talking to the ref, too, which is just even more asinine in my mind. Like, you got evidence. You made a mistake. The ref made a clear mistake. A very clear and obvious mistake, in my opinion.
That was the crew who also missed the pass interference against the Chiefs, against the Packers. The egregious pass interference call that was missed, that was that crew. That crew will not be in the postseason. That has been confirmed. That will not be a playoff officiating crew. Saying all that, and to go back to your point, the thing that's holding back the Lions, and again, I understand the love of Dan Campbell, but you can't be considered a serious person when you're going for 2 from the 8-yard line. You can't be serious.
He got so angry and
you can't. I can like he was spite going for 2.
He did going for. He admitted that in the press conference. I don't know if you've seen that.
He did. I saw it. I listened to it. But he went for 2 on the 8-yard line against the Cowboys in a game that could, if you were to win that, could put you at the 1 seed in the playoffs. That was to keep you alive for the 1 seed. I think the Lions are a very good team.
Agreed.
A very, very good football team. But when I close my little eyes and I'm laying in bed, tucked under my little blankie, and I take a look in my eyeballs at who's going to hoist up the Lombardi Trophy, Dan Campbell, Mr. Biting Your Kneecaps Off, that's not the guy that's going to hold up that trophy. Neither is Jared Goff, and neither is the rest of them. I think they've had a great season. I think they play in the world's worst division. I think that benefits their – and again, I haven't looked at their schedule off the top of my head here, but I'm pretty sure the schedule's not great either that they've played.
Yeah, they're in the NFC, so.
I think they're a very good team. I don't think they are going to win a Super Bowl.
It's exactly, I think the point that Trace is trying to make is like there are these personas about these teams. The Cowboys can't get it done. The Bills, they can't get it done. The Lions, who believes in the Lions? The Browns, who believes in the Browns? And it's the same thing that he said about Alabama, right? Just at the professional level. The front of your jersey matters. It does. For whatever the reason, I've never been able to understand what happens at the professional level. We've seen it with the Steelers in our division. We've seen it with the Cardinals in the NL Central. For some reason, the jersey you wear matters, and until you overcome that, it's going to continue to matter. You can't overcome it. We've seen teams do that. I mean, we don't remember what the Chiefs were like before 2019, but the Chiefs were terrible. I mean, they made like 8 straight postseasons and didn't win a game. They're not a proud franchise before what happened recently, but you can't overcome that. So until that happens, I'll continue to believe that they won't overcome it, though.
Yeah, we have breaking news in the chat. Obviously, our own account broke it here via Tom Bogert. FC Cincinnati has signed United States men's national team center back Miles Robinson. I don't know what that says. I hope that's exciting news for FC Cincinnati folks.
That's huge.
But I also am very concerned about our U.S. men's national team when our center back is signing with FC Cincinnati. Now, I'm not here to try to be the negative guy, so congratulations to FC Cincinnati. But by God, if we're trying to win a World Cup and our center back is signing with FC Cincinnati, should I be concerned about that?
No,
We're
don't
not
be
trying to win a
concerned.
World Cup. We're just trying to not embarrass our country.
He played for Atlanta United his entire career. Another MLS
Yeah, we're
team.
trying not
He's
to
just
lose
he's
to
just going
Trinidad
over
and
he's just
Tobago.
going over to the dynasty that's being created here in Cincinnati. Paired with Matt Miazga, who just was
that's
the
a good
reigning
pair.
defender of MLS.
So to
How
clear
are you-
this
how are
up,
you
to
gonna
be
score-
fair to
how are you
me,
gonna
I have
score
no
on
clue
us?
about any of these guys, and I'll openly admit that.
How are you going to score on us?
Question I have for anybody, even the chat per se, is this a guy on his way out? Is like an older player? He used to be on the. Is
26.
This like a former United States men's national team, or is he going to play in the next World Cup?
You can do both, Trace.
Yeah, you can
I
do
know
both.
you can do both, but I'm saying the next World Cup, he might not be good enough to actually make the men's national team.
No, he's 26 years old.
So he's going to be on the men's national team,
Correct.
and he's signing with FC Cincinnati.
Correct. He was the top free agent in MLS this year.
Okay. So he just likes being in America, hopefully, or is this a situation where Trace is clueless about soccer? I'd like to think that my national team players,
Oh, no.
the
We
guys
don't-
that are going for the cup, the
Nope,
guys that
nope,
we scream and yell about every year, we're trying to get out of pool play. And if we get out of pool play, by God, we get to the elimination rounds. Knockout rounds is I think what it's called. And then when we get to the knockout rounds, inevitably every single time we lose to a country that has like 70 people in it.
Trinidad and Tobago.
Great country.
I'll just see how many starts he has. How about that?
I'm just concerned that a guy that we are hoping to play on our national team
Isn't
is
playing on the-
signing with FC Cincinnati. And maybe
Trace wants him
maybe
in another
I
country.
would if
In
you
the
were like,
Premier
hey, he's
League.
signing with Real Madrid, I might get excited about the next World Cup. I don't know. And maybe
Here.
I'm being completely naive at this point.
He's
probably-
appeared.
Freddie Adu supposed to come up.
He's appeared on 27 national team games, and he has 3 goals. So I think he's a pretty important figure if he's scoring goals. I don't know that. He's a defender, so he must be getting a lot of head balls.
How do you score on us? In all seriousness.
Yeah, like FC's got a really, really good back end now. Matt Miazga, Miles Robinson. I mean,
Are we the Browns?
you might
Browns?
think. That's like
They just
Myles
decided
Garrett.
to take Myles Garrett away from us because he wanted to yell at some referees in the damn tunnel.
Yeah,
big
seriously.
deal. What a league! Great league that is.
And then we got TJ Watt to back up that defense now. So now we got Myles Garrett and TJ Watt.
Gotcha. I love that. In fact, from now on, Casey, if you could do me a favor, every time we get breaking news or any MLS news, if you could just put it inside of NFL terms for me, that would be exquisite.
Okay.
That would be
I'll
exactly
do
what
that.
I need. I need you to give me perfect analogies and scenarios of what I'm expecting. Everett's asking, how does this affect the U.S. men's national team? It doesn't. I'm just saying, when you look at other teams in the World Cup, their guys are playing they're not playing for the this is where I probably should stop, but I'm not going to. They're not playing for the Florence Freedom in the World Baseball Classic, These guys are playing for major league teams. Now, I
Well,
get
like,
it.
for what it's worth,
This
like,
is the
Japan-
Major League Soccer. and
Japan-
maybe I'm downplaying the MLS, but every time I've talked to anybody that loves soccer, they're like, yeah, I like the MLS, but, it's kind of like AA or single A baseball. I'm like, really?
Japan just won the World Baseball Classic, and they had like 3 players that play in the MLB.
These things are true, but that's also because I'd like to still think in my heart of hearts, even though it's not true, but I'll still use it as a crutch and an excuse as long as I live until they win it all, which they've done in the past. But if the Americans don't win it, then I'll just make the excuse that we got guys that don't really want to play in it because they don't want to get hurt, which isn't really fair. But that's
Let
the
the arms
excuse that I'll
throw.
continue
Let
to
the
use.
arms throw.
That's right.
Please.
So is this our year?
I don't know, but
How dare
I
you.
just want to apologize for getting us off track and talking about FC Cincinnati and the MLS and
I think
the
this is
United
our
States
year.
men's national team. I'm not going down that rabbit hole of whether it's our year or not. We'll find out because they get to play games, Elliot. And I will promise you one thing: I will find a way to get down to TQL Stadium.
Guys.
That's where we're at.
You guys are
I had
just
fun
jerks.
when I went.
I agree. We should talk about the NFL because it's probably a little more interesting.
Yeah, so now we switch from football to football.
That's right. If you're keeping track at home, that's American football. So I don't know where we were at before, but I would venture to say we did this last year and we did it successfully. Now we only did it to make the playoffs, and we said if you, I think it was like week 12 of the NFL season last year, where we all picked one team that we thought was going to make the playoffs that had really good odds, high odds, and we took the Jags, and I think the Jags proved us right last year.
Did it?
I say we have to get our sleeper team with the chat. Where the chat's going to have to be involved here because they're going to probably be a tiebreaker. But between the teams that are remaining to win their conference, they have to be one of the bottom seeds. They have to be a 5 seed or higher.
They have to be a wild card seed?
5 seed or higher. Wild card seed to make the Super Bowl. If we have to put money on it in the office, which one are we taking?
It's the Browns, right? I mean,
Yeah, it's the Browns. It's Browns and whoever the NFC East.
You could say the Eagles, which I don't know. I have to look up what our odds are on the Eagles.
The Eagles
here.
are more than likely going to be a wild card team. I mean, if the Bills make it as a wild card team, that's who I want as my wild card team to win the conference, without a doubt. That's who I'd put the most money on. But if it's in the NFC, whoever the NFC East team is, I prefer them over, I guess the only other team that would be up for consideration is a red hot Rams. But yeah, there's not a whole lot of decisions. Not a whole lot of decisions there.
I'm looking up I'm pulling up the
At
chance
this
to win
moment-
to win the AFC. Okay.
At this point, the Eagles are going to probably be a wild card team for what it's worth.
Yeah, but I don't really want to take the Eagles. I don't think that's fair. I don't think that's.
I'm taking the Rams if that's the case. I think that's the next best option.
Okay, here's what you got in the NFC. If you like value, you have the Eagles at plus 550. You have the Detroit Lions at plus 850. You have the Rams at plus 2,500, and you have the Green Bay Packers currently at plus 4,400. If you'd like to take someone outside of the cut line for the playoff odds, you have the Saints at plus 10,000, the Seahawks at plus 10,000, the Vikings at plus 100,000.
These are to win the conference?
These are to win the NFC Championship. The Vikings. Can you tell me what it takes for the Vikings to make the playoffs?
They're probably not even like they've.
It looks like they're already eliminated based off the odds.
They would
I'm
have
just
to,
wondering, is it taking?
Yeah, they've got to win, and then we need Then they would
That's
need
all right. We can use we.
the Saints the Falcons to beat the Saints, the Panthers to beat the Bucks, the Bears to beat the Packers, and the Cardinals to beat the Seahawks.
So in order to make the playoffs, we need Armageddon.
Correct.
Okay, good to know. Maybe that's why the odds are plus 100,000. For those that don't know what that means, you could put $100 down on the Vikings to win the NFC Championship, and if you were to win, you get $100,000. So I just like those odds. I thought that's good value. I mean, I get that it's a lottery ticket, but still, I mean, I guess they'd still have to win the NFC, which isn't going to happen. But anyway, I'm going to take. Am I allowed to take the Lions at plus 850?
Well, you.
I know that I said 5 or
do
higher,
not take conference winners, and you.
But here's why I said that, because you have the Eagles who are favored ahead of the Lions. So realistically speaking, they are the 4th or worst odds. Am I allowed to cheat the rules?
So why don't we just
What's
make
our
it
best value there? What's our
best?
best value?
If you're trying to find the best value, and I'm looking at the conferences in the NFC, I would say that probably the Rams at 25-1. That's pretty considerable value.
Yeah.
Because the Rams are playing better football at this very moment than the Philadelphia Eagles. They are. They just are. And then in the AFC, I'd say the best value is probably a team. I don't know. I don't see a whole lot of value there at all besides the Browns, 14-1. The Bills being 4-1 to win the conference, and they might not make the postseason is hilarious. Like, that's crazy.
All right, we'll jump to the AFC side. We'll ask the question in the chat poll question here while we debate the AFC. The NFC is, of the teams, you're going to have to put the plus sign next to it, Casey. Which has the better value? Lions plus 850, Rams plus 2,500. And then I'm going to give the third option, which I think it's only because of value. So don't kill me, please. The Buccaneers at plus 4,800.
They looked bad this past week, but Baker was slinging it the weeks before that.
I'm just saying that,
Looked real bad.
you get a home game as well.
They're going to play the Eagles probably week 1 in the playoffs. They've got a tough road. They'd go Eagles and then to Dallas, and then probably to San Francisco.
Yes.
Who's got better value for conference champs? Lions, Rams, Bucks.
But if there's a guy that's
Rams,
gonna play with a little bit of swagger in those three,
I would even put the Eagles if you have the fourth option.
Eagles at 5-1 isn't a terrible. I mean,
No,
like
it's
I
not.
said,
Eagles 5. That almost seems like a trap bet if we're being completely honest. That makes me believe less in the Eagles. You see what I do? I do the Elliot school of belief system when you look at lines, because realistically speaking, if you told me, hey, you can get 5-1 odds on the Eagles, I'm thinking, wow, that seems like a great bet. But it also feels like, hey, here's the cheese, go ahead, and then smack. Eagles are playing terrible right now. Are they good? Period. Nobody knows. Reed just told you that their defense is atrocious.
I mean, what if this was a ploy for them to just have a chance to play the Tampa Bay Bucks?
I don't know. I mean,
Rams have phenomenal value.
You mean to tell me, Casey, right now you're asking me to believe that the
I mean,
Eagles
I don't
are losing
think-
on purpose so they can go play a road game?
I don't think they're losing on purpose. I just think that in the back of their mind, they're not as worried about winning their division because they know if they get the fifth spot that they get to play the terrible NFC South.
Yeah,
so
I don't know.
So
they just
here's
lost to the Cardinals.
Thing. So you're a Packers fan. What's
this is
the weakest part of the Packers team?
They're inconsistent.
Their defense is pretty bad, right? Like everyone wants
even their offense at times isn't very good.
Everyone wants
they're
Joe
a very
Barry
average.
gone, right?
Okay, I would say this: the Packers are an average football team. Okay, to where I could argue that they're not good at anything. Could also argue that for 1 week though, both sides of the ball can play well enough not to beat anybody. I really don't know if they can beat everybody because I don't think they can. But they have a puncher's chance. Like, it's kind of like a heavyweight fight in a super Buster Douglas type thing, right, where probably not going to win the fight, but by God, they're heavyweights. Something might luckily happen and they knock a guy out.
From what I've heard about from Packers fans, is everyone hates Joe Barry. Everyone hates this Packers defense is absolutely atrocious. The Packers defense is better in almost every statistical category than the Eagles defense. Eagles defense is 29th in points per game. 29th. And they're 23rd in yards per game. That's a serious hole in a team. That's a serious hole. But that being said, they went to the Super Bowl last year. They got Jalen Hurts. They've got a guy that is a perceived pretty good coach, Sirianni. They've got the most unstoppable play in the league, so that's tough. But, I don't think we're talking enough about this Eagles defense and the problems that persist with it.
All right. We'll jump to the AFC here really quickly. We have obviously Baltimore, who's the favorite. They're plus 135. You have the Chiefs in the Bills, basically backed up right next to each other. Plus 420 for the Chiefs, plus 430 for the Bills. The Dolphins are at plus 600. The Jaguars at plus 1,700. And then you have the Browns plus 2,000. The Texans, I want to know, what does it take for the Texans to get in the playoffs? Do they just have to win?
Yes, I think they just have to win.
They just have to win. This has to be the best odds, in my opinion, of all the odds that we've seen.
Yeah, if they win, they're in. If they lose, they're out.
Okay. Plus 3,800 for the Texans. Who do they play this weekend?
They play the Colts. I think it's winner gets in.
Okay. And the line in that game, probably is it?
It's
going to be a 3-point spread.
It's in Indianapolis. It's a pick 'em.
Pick 'em. Okay. Plus 3,800 for the Texans. The Texans have one thing that I could argue, two things I could argue that can get them to the Super Bowl. Well, you've seen it in Cincinnati. They have a defensive line that can get pressure on a quarterback. And I think they have one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Now, I know he's young. I get all that. I don't know
he's
if
Stroud.
I don't know if he's proven himself. Say it again.
You said he's young. Bryce Young plays for the Panthers.
This is true. It's a good joke. But he's a guy that, in my opinion, is capable of carrying his team to a Super Bowl, and you'd have to have some chaos. For the Texans to win the championship, they're going to probably have to go through. Who would they have to go through? They'd have to go through Miami if Miami were to win, and then they'd have to go through Baltimore.
They
would be the 7 seed, right?
Yeah. So that's
They
what
would be the
have to do.
7 seed, so yeah, they would have to play whoever wins the AFC East.
Well, actually, we have this little handy dandy thing I've been holding on to. Why don't we just do it right here?
Yeah.
Why
All
don't we
right.
just do the playoff scenario?
So who we think's going to win, the Steelers or the Ravens? We'll just go through this whole thing.
It's the Ravens. Well, let's just take the favorites in almost every game.
Okay, so if we take the favorites in every game, it's
I do
actually
want-
the Steelers winning that game. They're 4-point favorites against the Ravens.
Well, then there you go. Take them.
Okay.
I want the Texans just for my own little
Okay.
game here.
Bucks over Panthers.
Bucks, yeah. I don't know.
Bengals over Browns.
Yep.
Vikings or Lions.
Lions.
Lions are 3-point favorites.
Yeah.
This
they
game
probably
doesn't
won't
matter.
Win, but
Falcons versus Saints.
Elliot, you gonna pick one of these?
Well, it's you. He's doing it with you.
Saints are 3.5-point favorites.
Saints.
Jags or Texans.
Jags or Titans?
Titans.
Jags. I can see it. Seahawks.
Seahawks, Packers.
Honestly, I hate to say this, but it's gonna be the Bears. But go ahead.
Oh, you want the Bears?
I don't want the Bears. I'm just telling you that's what's gonna happen. Chiefs. Yep.
We need the Raiders in that one.
Boy, do we need the Raiders.
We need the Raiders in that one.
I mean, we haven't really talked about it on this show, but ladies and gentlemen, you please send a prayer. We need the Raiders to win.
Eagles at Giants. Eagles.
Eagles.
This is a tough one.
I'll take San Fran.
San Fran. Cowboys.
And I'll take the Cowboys, and then finally,
the tough one.
I'm going to take the Dolphins.
Okay.
I think the Dolphins are going to win that game.
Well, with that
you would
moves-
actually have the Bills out of the postseason. The way that you.
Oh my
picked it.
God.
That's wild.
And with that, Houston is at the 6th seed, which means that they would play Kansas.
Kansas City.
Kansas City.
How come everybody in this room can't stand?
They
when you
cannot
do that?
stand when I
Boy,
do
they
that.
can't stand when you do that.
It's not in Kansas.
Tom
Because it's
has
not
never been
Kansas.
more on your case than when you say Kansas every single time. He's like, they play in Missouri. And I mean, he's right, to be fair. The city part is kind of important. But if you want to keep saying Kansas, I know what you mean, Casey, which is fine by me. That's all the English language is meant to do anyways, Casey, is communicate with other people. So if they know what you mean, you're actually doing a good enough job.
Yeah.
Some are saying you're not doing an excellent job, but you're doing a good enough job.
I have to agree with that point. Yeah.
Okay. All right. You just fell on the sword on that
Could you
one.
imagine if you called the Bengals Ohio?
Well, it's not Ohio. It's Cincinnati. I just use whatever
Yeah.
it starts with. I don't have to read the whole thing.
So when you
out
say
to-
the Jets, you just go new.
Yeah, new.
well, it's
York?
New York.
No, it's New York. Listen, he's saying the first name of the city, which there's not another city that has a first name.
New York.
Huh?
New York.
Yeah, but he would have to say New York then. He can't just say
Los Angeles.
It's New York City. It's not New City.
It's New York.
Sorry, I'm defending Casey here for his inability to say city, but I have to do it. Somebody's got to defend him.
All right.
He's getting called a bandwagon fan last week.
I love the Sam.
He is.
Nobody,
He is a bandwagon
nobody,
fan.
nobody has their more behavioral and emotional swings on a football game than maybe Casey McAllister. And if it's not Casey, then it's Elliot. And if it's not Elliot, then it's Reed. We got 3 guys in here that live and die by those folks, which is fine until inevitably you watch a team and you're like, wow, this team's not very good because they can't play defense. And then Joe Burrow goes down, and then
Let me ask you this.
I do know one thing: how many wins are they going to end up with, Reed?
Who, the Bengals?
Yep.
If they went on 9, hopefully. I mean, they're 7-point favorites, so yeah, 9.
Did you watch more Bengals?
9. I'm not trying to take credit for this, but I know we walked through that brown door right there, right after the Monday after
Thursday.
the massacre, or the Friday it was after the Ravens game, and I'm pretty sure you asked how many wins the Bengals were going to have, and I'm pretty sure that somebody in here said 9.
You did say 9.
I said the over-under was 8.5. And Trace took the over.
Took the over. Hey.
Did you watch more Bengals games or Packers games this year?
Bengals games. Yeah. I mean, I watched the Packers, but there was a few times where, Packers played during when I had family functions, so I just unfortunately weren't able to watch. And I got to be honest, the Bengals played in some primetime games. They played on some Saturdays. They played on some Monday nights.
Fun team.
So, big time.
You
Is that narrative going to get slept finally? Are we going to finally get rid of the notion that the Bengals are slept on, no one talks about them? You think that's going to go away?
Sure. I don't know if anyone said that this year.
I don't know, man. It seems like every time
No,
I turn around.
they say it every year. Every preseason when the Bengals aren't like top 3 to win the Super Bowl.
This year they were, though.
I know, that's what I'm saying. What's going to happen, though, is the Bengals won't be favored. So to answer your question, I think that narrative will be brought back.
Well, I mean, like to defend national pundits, I love the Cincinnati Bengals, obviously. But, like, we are, out of 32 teams, the 30th market. Like we're not a big market. We literally are Dayton and Cincinnati and a little bit of Northern Kentucky, and that's it. Indiana's all Colts. North of Dayton's all Browns. So, like, we are the 30th out of 32 markets, just off the top of my head. So, like, I wouldn't talk about us a whole lot if I was a national guy, unless they were in back-to-back AFC Championship games. Then
it all comes down to stars, too. I mean, like, the reason that everyone talks about Kansas City is because of what they've been able to do. And if the Bengals continue to make runs, then Joe Burrow is going to become not the poster boy or the pretty boy or whatever term you'd like to use, but there's some flair there with Joe Burrow. Chi-Town, he's back. Said he's been super busy. What have you been busy doing? What have you been doing? What's so?
He makes TikToks. I watch his TikToks.
Does he? Nice.
Is he selling houses?
That. He's been busy, though. He said he's still supporting his favorite podcast. We appreciate you. We appreciate many of you. Loyal, very loyal viewers, listeners, however you may obtain and get us. Might be podcast version. Most of you obviously are on the tube of you.
Do we want to do ads real quick before we do Kirby?
Love that.
I think that'd be a good
I
idea.
think we forgot yesterday.
Well, forgot would be the wrong term. How about we decided
Neglected.
Neglected is definitely the best term you've used in this office since you've started.
Thank you. I studied that one. I just looked it up. Neglected. I thought that was a good word to use. Casey?
All right. The Bengals report. Actually, there was no real Bengals talk today, or Bearcats talk.
It was very much talked about. What are you talking about?
The Bengals.
I just talked about them, Casey.
We had 9 wins.
I literally just said they don't get the respect they deserve.
Yeah, well, it's not really a report.
That's a report. Who's it brought to you by?
Fine.
Who's it
brought to you by Encore Technologies. Encore Technologies provides IT solutions for a data-centered world with the suite of services from mobile computing to desktop to data center, supporting both centralized and work-from-home computing modules to improve efficiency and
productivity.
Visit encore.tech. The path to innovation begins here.
Productivity.
And let me tell you about this lovely bottle of water right here, made right here in Hamilton, Ohio. Pahhni water uses natural limestone filtration, unlike the artificial processing other brands use. The result is a healthy alkaline water, and some say the best tasting water in the world. Visit Pahhni Water at PAHHNI water.com to see where you can buy this great tasting water. Get your coffee from UDF, drink lots of Pahhni water, and get your technology solutions from Encore.
That's right. That is right. For those that probably watch this show loyally, you noticed that obviously we changed the ticker. We're working on trying to get some fresh, what would we call that? Fresh blood sounds like stupid. That's not what I was looking for, but some refresh things. Obviously, we were with Bedfred. We were thankful for Bedfred for the partnership, but we didn't see eye to eye on everything. Perhaps who knows? Maybe we'll find a way to see eye to eye at some point. But the reality is that we're in a position at Chatterbox where we want to be we want things to be fair and equal. And if we don't think they're fair and equal, then so be it. That's fine. We move on and we keep it moving.
So am I allowed to say other sports books now?
Yeah, I think that you are allowed. Now, to be fair,
FanDuel.
are they the
DraftKings.
I mean, this seems like
Caesars.
This seems like
BetMGM.
Something you've had pent up.
Bet365. Rivers.
You can't keep going.
Hard Rock. Wait. I think I've got one more.
Degenerate.
No,
That's what
I
we
don't think
call
I
you.
have it. I don't think I have it. Go ahead. Sorry.
ESPN bets.
ESPN bets.
There you go. Who knew? Who knew? All right. Well, we also had something happen here around here at Chatterbox. For those that have obviously paid attention, you probably already know this, but Nick Kirby, somebody that started Chatterbox Reds with us last year. I really don't know how else to say it. We got lucky. We got lucky. I asked this guy to do something crazy. I was talking to him. For those that don't know, I was just literally talking to him what felt like maybe at 11 o'clock at night on Zoom. And I said, hey, I have an idea. I don't know if you want to do it or not, but I'd like to do a podcast. But the only way to separate yourselves, you're going to do something crazy, in my opinion. You got to do a show after every single game. You got to have a podcast for every single game right after. And, it doesn't need to be crazy long. It can be short and sweet. And we thought, yeah, we'll just do a 10, 15-minute podcast every single night. We'll just jump on there, 10, 15 minutes, no problem. We'll keep it moving. Sure enough, we thought, I don't know, Reds might lose 100 games. Now, we weren't hoping for that, but that certainly was in the cards. We looked at, when the over-under on your team is 64.5, and you have people sit up top of desks of really astounded and well-known baseball people saying that they're going to be terrible and all of those things, you have little to no hope going into the season, but we're still willing to do it. Sure enough, one thing led to another. The Reds win 12 straight games. Then all of a sudden, people find interest in our show. And I'm going to give him a shout out right before he comes on, because without them, quite frankly, Nick Kirby has, there's as much as we love Nick, there would have never been a realistic chance of adding him to the crew as quickly as we did. And that was DSC and John with DSC. So we have the opportunity now to have Nick with us full time, which he's going to help us do a multitude of things. But before I start the Reds convo, Nick, I just want to say Happy New Year. Thank you.
I was the only one who clapped.
Thank you
Nick.
for joining. Thank you for
record.
joining Chatterbox. Appreciate you.
I booed.
Well, booze already. Wow. All right. Well, Happy New Year, fellas. Appreciate you having me on a day when FC Cincinnati signed the Ohtani equivalent. It's an honor to be on the airways with you guys.
Yeah. Well, we won't let FC Cincinnati signing derail us for too much longer, because I've already done that on this show once. I still am somewhat concerned about the national team, but that's here nor there. All right. Frankie Montas. He's a guy that many people have split opinions on. I got text messages as soon as it was announced by family members asking me, what are we doing? We're signing a guy for 1 year, $16 million. Guy didn't even pitch but 2 innings last year. And when he did pitch, he was average at best. Now, this is obviously some of the other naysayers are saying, well, when he pitched well, it was only because he threw for Oakland. They had a big ballpark. Despite his splits, I'm sure that you would have those in front of you and say, well, that's not quite the case. But there is obviously a little bit of a crowd here, Nick. Let's not act like everybody is doing dancing in the streets for this signing. There's a little bit of the crowd that's asking themselves, $16 million. That's a lot of money. Do you think that's where we're at in the state of baseball, where, again, if you go to the grocery store, Nick, don't know if you've been to the grocery store lately, but 5 years ago, things that you used to buy in the grocery store didn't cost nearly as much as they used to cost. Is this more of a reflection on inflation in baseball than it is about the Reds believing in this guy as much or significantly, where they had to have him and they were willing to pay him whatever, or overpay, if you want to call it that?
Yeah, no question. I mean, I think a $16 million contract is probably like a $10 or $8 million contract maybe 5-6 years ago. It's just a totally different state. You have to overpay. And then the Reds on top of that, I think, have to overpay a little bit for pitchers just because of their ballpark, especially when you're signing guys that are on short-term deals where they're trying to reestablish their value. So you factor the two of those things together. I mean, this is just what a pitcher like that's going to cost. I mean, look, this guy has a lot of upside. Finished 6th in the Cy Young vote in 2021. That wasn't all that long ago. This is the kind of risk I like the Reds to take. A 1-year risk. If it works out, it'd be incredible. You have a top of the rotation type arm. If not, it's a 1-year contract. It doesn't change anything about the long-term future of the team.
I think the better, not I want to say better question, but the one area of conversation that I don't know has been discussed as much as maybe it should have been is what is the Reds' kind of plan, or what would they like to have happen moving forward? Because one thing that people obviously maybe scream and yell about is they want this team to spend money, right? You got to spend money to win. You got to spend money to win. And for all intents and purposes, that is true. Me and you, I think we see eye to eye on this a little bit. You at some point have to obviously pony up in certain situations to try to fill holes that otherwise you weren't going to be able to take care of on your own through your own guys. The only thing that I have at this point to ask you is, when you spend 1 year $16 million, yes, it's only money, right? But you could also make the case, and I'm playing devil's advocate to a certain extent here, you could make the case that you could use that $16 million on extending Noelve Marte, or extending Matt McClain, or extending Ellie De La Cruz, or extending X player. That is still money that the Reds are shelling out that they otherwise could have used somewhere else. And that is I don't want to say that's the logical argument, but that would be, to me, if you were to want to be the pessimistic viewer, or maybe even the devil's advocate, that is the one case scenario where I could actually somewhat sit there and listen to a reasonable debate about. My question is, in a roundabout way, is do you think the Reds even have a plan yet as to what they want to do? Do they want to start extending guys that are this young core, or do you think they just want to wait it out a little bit and say, you know what, we don't know what we have. We got him for 5 more years. Let's just ride it out.
I wouldn't put it past the Reds to still extend a player or two this offseason. Most of these deals that you see with contract extensions, the first couple years are not much. It's down the road, which is why I think that the Reds really pushed hard for short-term contracts. Number one, it's not long-term risk. Number two, it gives them more flexibility to be able to extend guys. And a lot of these guys are just going to cost more on their normal years of control as they get deeper into arbitration. The problem really with the Reds contract extensions is I think the guys that would probably be the most willing to sign a contract extension, I don't know if necessarily it's in the Reds' best interest. Like, I don't really think Matt McClain at this point, it makes a lot of sense to go sign a big contract extension too, just because he is older. He was so good last year. It's like, are you signing him at you signing him at too high? You have to be careful with some of these guys, because I think, after the first year of Jonathan Indy and Tyler Stevenson, we all wanted to extend those guys, right? And that obviously was a good decision that they didn't at this point, even though I still think both those guys could be valuable next year. Those contract extensions obviously would not have aged very well.
Now, you might want to believe Nick Kroll. I'm a man that doesn't really believe wholeheartedly everything he says. I think that there's times where he obviously leads things on to a public perception that he's trying to do or not trying to do. He's done that with Jonathan India at times. He was not on the market back at the trade deadline. They're not interested in moving, and then all of a sudden you see reports that they are interested in moving him, and then they were already very transparent and upfront with him about the offseason, about how he's probably going to move, and you can just kind of sense that through some of the interviews that even India did towards the end of the year, and certainly what he said at Reds Fest. He said this organization is very, very honest and transparent of where they're coming from. So that tells me that they've obviously had discussions with him, that they are actively shopping him. My question is that Nick Kroll said that just a couple days ago on the announcement of Montas that essentially they are probably done with big free agent signings for the rest of the years, and there's not really any more big moves to be made. They might add, I think in his words, a depth guy or a bench guy or something along those times, or some of those terms, and relief pitching. Do you believe him?
Yeah, I think they're probably done with any sort of big deal unless something falls in their lap with the trade. I don't see them signing more free agents. When I saw that Buck Farmer contract, that kind of made me think, all right, they're done with the bullpen. Buck Farmer is like your last signing. I don't think you sign Buck Farmer if you're still waiting out other potential free agents. I can't imagine the Reds are going to sign another starting pitcher at this point. I mean, you're up to 8 legitimate starting pitching options, which I'm great. I love that. I'm all about stockpiling, but I don't see them going any more than 8 starters. And that's not even including guys like Christian Roa that are going to be starting there at AAA. They do have some upside. maybe there's a platoon outfielder that kind of, falls in the Reds' lap, like a Michael A. Taylor or someone that they like. But it depends on if you find that big or not. That's about probably the biggest thing I can see the Reds doing, unless somehow some sort of big trade kind of comes together that they're not expecting.
Yeah, of course, you never know what the future holds from time to time. You can also make the case and the argument that as the offseason progresses, you get later and later and later into this offseason, both sides, of a deal, when they're trying to negotiate, it becomes much, much finer, and it starts to materialize where maybe one side cracks before the other. They start to show their true colors, and they're like, you know what? And I know that Cease has been talked about significantly in all these different pieces, but my point is that if there is a move to be made, it very much could happen late, and it might be a situation where something that was talked about before, where it was quote-unquote off limits, is now all of a sudden on the table because somebody called someone else's bluff. And the same thing could be said about some free agents as well. If there was one thing, though, to push back on you thinking they were done, and if you had a wish list, and I know Christmas is over, but it's a new year, why not just maybe have one more run in the sun with Mr. Santa Claus? If there was one more thing that you wish that the Reds would do, what would it be if they did make one more, we'll call it somewhat significant move?
Well, I think you'd have to make another move, because I think you've kind of got to a point where you probably have too many position players at this point, which, again, I'm normally the you can never have too many. I'd love to see the Reds, if Jorge Soler, they could get him on a contract that wasn't too unreasonable. I just think you put his bat right in the middle of the lineup, hitting a great American ballpark. He absolutely destroys left-handed pitching. But a roster with India, Steer, and Soler, three guys that, and I guess probably throw CES into there too. That's basically four guys that are like first base DH types. Maybe can kind of play a corner outfield. That's probably a little bit too much, but he would be the one guy that I think could really take the Reds to the next level if they could get him.
I don't think I asked you this. What do you think that the Reds are going to do with CES? Of course, if he produces. If he doesn't produce, there's obviously clear signs that he could regress, or whatever you want to call it, maybe get a time back in Louisville. We all don't hope that, obviously. But what do you think that the Reds' plan A is with CES? Do you think it's more time at first base, or do you think it's probably more time as a designated hitter?
I think the answer to that question depends a lot on the other players around them. Depends on, does Noelvi Marte, Ellie De La Cruz, and Matt McLain all stay healthy and producing? If they are, then I think you probably see him more at DH and you see Candelario more at first base. But if one of those guys aren't, or they get hurt, I think Candelario's playing, third base or second base, and then CES is playing first base, and then they move Steer or India from the outfield to the DH. So it really is, there's Reds lineup, and I think you're going to see it. There's going to be so many moving pieces on A, who's producing, and B, who's healthy. But they have a lot of options, which is good. You're not gonna see the Diamondbacks' recent signing, Kevin Newman. You're not gonna see those type of players a lot. You're gonna see players that do have a lot of upside, not more average at best players like Newman, like Senzel. Every player that the Reds are going to put on their roster, I think, has legitimate upside.
Yeah, I mean, congratulations to Kevin Newman. I do genuinely mean that. The Arizona Diamondbacks, they got a good one, and I hope they recognize that in Arizona. I'm sure in Glendale right now they're jumping for joy all over Phoenix. They are raising glasses to cheers as we speak.
Well, Trace. The exciting thing here is, like, Kevin Newman was the Reds' backup shortstop going into last year. The Reds don't need a backup shortstop because their backup shortstop is their third baseman and their second baseman, Marte and McLain. And that's just what excites me so much about this roster is you can shift so many different players around to where you don't have to play guys that really aren't, that don't have a lot of upside. That's what really, really excites me about this roster this year.
There is some flexibility, certainly. But before I let you go, the flexibility comes at a cost because somebody's going to be unhappy. And that's the question that I have is I guess you can marvel at competition, yes, and I am all for competition in every imagination of the word. But at some point, though, you have guys like Will Benson, you have T.J. Friedel, you have Jake Fraley, you have Jonathan India, and you also have the outside chance that one of these young kids is going to come up and they're going to do what they did last year, and you're going to have somebody, I don't know who it's going to be, Nick, but somebody's going to make their case that they deserve a chance at the big league level. The question is what are the Reds going to do, or what do you think that they should do if you have a situation where Jonathan India, Jake Fraley, and I'd say Will Benson to a certain extent, and I'm sure I'm missing some folks as I'm sitting here trying to do this off the top of my head. Is there a logjam, and are you worried about that to a small extent?
Yeah, I mean, maybe with like Steer in India. Again, this is assuming health. If everyone is healthy, I think you're going to see a pretty good player sitting on the bench on opening day. It might be Spencer Steer, which I think a lot of people would really like take a step back at. But you'll have to see how a lot of this plays out. I think Indy has a chance to be a decent left fielder. I was looking the other day at India's numbers since he came up in 2021. They're like almost identical offensively to like Gurriel Jr. So if it's a big if he can play a decent left field, I think he could really be a solid outfielder. But what to see, there's a lot of fascinating things at spring training to see how these guys look in different positions. But the player to watch, Trace, that player that could push his way onto the roster is Blake Dunn.
No doubt. Blake Dunn's obviously the one that seems to be the most apparent, but as always, and we found this out last year, you don't ever know. I mean, you really don't 100% know. If you would have told us in spring training that Brandon Williamson was going to be the most consistent starter that the Reds were going to have in the back end of their season, we would have laughed all the way to wherever we were headed. So you just that's one of the beautiful things about baseball is you just don't know. The one question in the chat, Nick asks, he wants you to discuss a little bit of the international free agent signings. I don't know if you really have anything to add about it. Clearly, people get excited about these things. I try not to be the pessimistic person in the room at all times. But for me and someone like myself, when you sign a 19-year-old kid or an 18-year-old kid out of Australia or 17, however old these kids are, and by all means, they are lottery tickets from time to time, and every time you buy a lottery ticket, you have a chance to hit it. You can't hit the lottery if you don't play, right? And Ellie De La Cruz, for all intents and purposes, was a lottery ticket, and by all accounts, as long as nothing crazy happens, it looks as if that's going to pay off immensely. Is there anything that you've seen recently with the international signings that excites you, or any overall thoughts about it in general?
I try not to get too excited about players that they sign internationally just because so many of the top international signings don't pan out. Now, I think it's incredibly important for the Reds to be heavily invested in that, which I know they are. I know they opened an academy in the Dominican last year. They're fully invested in that. But I don't necessarily get attached to any like particular players. I know like Alfredo Duno looks really, really good, but these guys they're so hard to predict. But you get as many of them as you can, and sometimes the guys that pan out are the Ellie De La Cruz that was the afterthought of those international signings. But I think it's very important that the Reds continue to be aggressive with the international class. But I'm not really going to get attached to any one particular player until maybe they like at least reach Daytona, because before that it's so hard to really put any sort of stock into any of those numbers. And Daytona is where many players go and they get humbled because it's a very, very difficult environment for hitters in the Florida State League with big ballparks. So if you hit there, that's when I'll start getting excited about you.
All right, we have an esteemed, privileged another person on this show that wants to ask a question. His name is Elliot Ringering. Some people call him Zebra. Elliot, you got something for Nick?
Yeah, hi Nick. How you doing, buddy?
Hi, pal.
I got a question for you. It's regarding last season. If you had to give an LVP award, that's the least valuable player, I'm going to give you 4 options just to help you out. I'm going to give you 4 players. Who would you say out of these 4 was the least valuable player for the Reds? Luke Weaver, Will Myers, Stuart Fairchild, or Chad Pinder? Who would be the least?
Stuart Fairchild being on that list is a disgrace.
No, it's right. It's right.
It's a disgrace.
Where were you for the error in Chicago? Where were you for that error in center field
Where were you
Chicago?
for the game-winning hit in Pittsburgh, Rearing?
I was there for the inside the park home run against Miami, Kirby. I tried to like him. I tried my best, but guess what? He's not very good. He's not very good. And I will not have Stuart Fairchild on my opening day roster. I won't do it.
I do like that Pender somehow got on there.
Chad Pender, LVP.
It's got to be Will Myers. Luke
That's
Weaver,
fair.
hey, to his credit, he made his starts. He had a rubber arm. They used him until they absolutely couldn't. So I give him credit for making the starts, for taking his lumps. And he never asked to come out of the game. He said, "Coach, I've got one more in me." Will just did absolutely nothing. So sorry, Will.
Sorry, Will. Didn't play with batting gloves. I never trust people who don't play with batting gloves.
I couldn't imagine a former Rookie of the Year not producing for the Cincinnati Reds.
There he is. There it is.
Oh.
There it is. I'm not going to take this.
Who have the
Go ahead.
Cubs signed this offseason, Reed?
Yeah.
Any updates?
People are still talking about. Listen, we were coming down from a high of stealing Gray Counsell, one of the best managers in the league. So, listen, you don't want to just pile emotions on top of other emotions. So we're gonna let that fall out. We're gonna let that simmer, and then we're gonna go make our big moves. We're gonna make our big moves.
Player manager? Is he gonna play third base?
No, he's not, because we're probably gonna get like a Matt Chapman, little Matt Chapman.
Oh, okay.
Get some more defense. Why not? It's what we do best. Hey, Kirby, I put this in the chat earlier because there's so much vitriol that goes around this Jonathan India situation.
So much vitriol. Hatred.
How similar, in your opinion, is it to, because I'm a Cubs fan, similar to what kind of the Cubs went through with Starlin Castro? Because I just had a revelation about this, because Starlin Castro was obviously the focal point of the Cubs. Obviously, he was a little bit longer than Jonathan India has been for the Reds. But prime, really good hitter, terrible defensive player, and he kind of got pushed out by younger, better players like Addison Russell, Javi Baez, Chris Bryant. How similar do you think those situations are?
Yeah, that's probably a pretty fair comp. I don't know. I'm not giving up on Jonathan India. I think he could legitimately be a decent outfielder. He has good plate discipline. He walks at almost 10% of his plate appearances throughout his career. I have no idea, though, how he's going to look in the outfield. I don't think anyone does. So that's probably the most interesting thing in spring training that I'll be watching is every time they have a game on TV, I want to see how does Jonathan India look in the outfield. We'll be reading Charlie Goldsmith's tweets, hoping to get some nuggets on that. But I think it could be a really cool story if he comes back and plays well in the outfield. I think it could be a really awesome story in 2024.
Could be cool. I have a question for you. When spring training starts, Charlie Goldsmith's reporting on everyone reporting who's going to be in their best shape of their life. Who is most likely to get the tweet, so-and-so's in the best shape of their life, as we get every spring training from every team, from every beat reporter ever?
Probably Candelario, the new signing. They're going to he's trimmed down 5 pounds and Candelario.
He's in the best shape of his life. Love it. Thanks, Curbs.
Yep.
All right. Nick, again, to cap this off, thank you for jumping on board of this crazy ship. I don't even know if it's a ship at this point. I think it's like it might even be like a some days it feels like a jet ski, like
a rowboat.
No, I think a rowboat. I feel like that's being a little too discrediting towards us. Yacht, certainly way too fancy for this organization that we're calling a company, and I would say that if nothing, it's like a jet ski. Where one day we're flying, and the next day we're kind of just we're going the wrong direction, but we're going fast at all times. We don't know where we're going half the time, but nonetheless, try to steer the waters as clear as you can. Especially with some people around here, it becomes shark infested, but that's here nor there. Thank you for jumping on here, talking a little bit of Reds baseball, shedding a little bit of fun facts, and defending your man Stuart Fairchild.
I appreciate you having me. Excited to be on board with you guys.
All right. Thanks, Nick.
Love you, Nick.
All right.
You comparing us to a ship is so funny because I don't know how much of Friday's show you caught.
No, I didn't watch much of the Friday show, to be fair.
Titanic?
Tom said 6 times, "Can you spell Titanic?" And we're like, what does that mean? He just kept saying, "Can you spell Titanic?"
I know there are days in which obviously I'm doing some stuff behind the walls here, and you guys you come out and you grade or assess the show in and of itself, and you give yourselves your own personal grade. And you guys were fired up about your Thursday show. You thought you guys did an unbelievable job, this, that, and the other. And then you're like, you felt like you somewhat fumbled the bag there on the day right after Friday. But you know what? You get another day. You get another game. You get to play another down, as they say. We got 30 minutes left in this show. We just talked about the Reds. And at this point, I know I'm part of the Reds guy here at Chatterbox, but I'm not ready to turn the page completely to the Cincinnati Reds. I think that there's still some Bengals stuff to be had, and certainly the draft is one of the biggest topics of conversation that there is once your season ends, right? I'm not a huge mock draft guy because ultimately you just don't know what's available to you. And until you know what you think might be available to you, then what's the point? Is it just fantasy? Is it just fun to discuss? Is it just fun to just throw rhetoric at a wall and figure out what might stick? That seems to be what it is. And if that's the case, by all means, be my guest. But I am of the mindset that instead of talking about players, right, a specific player, what areas of emphasis or more or less, what do you think that the draft strategy should be? Are you guys a draft best player available type of guy no matter what, under any circumstance? Or are you of the mindset that you have one or two positions and no matter what, you're going to try to take best player available at one of those two positions? And if I were to ask that question, you can answer the first one, yes. But if you didn't answer the first one and you say you're taking best player available no matter what, I do want to know, what would be your top two positions of need if you were to put them in order? Anybody can take the reins. We'll start with Casey because I feel like, Casey's in a spot where he probably is the most notable or the knowledgeable about this subject, but he also kind of never gets his word in because we have other people in this office that talk a lot. Casey?
Thank you, Trace.
No problem.
For me, the Bengals have two very glaring needs. Actually, three. They have three really glaring needs.
Are you a best player available person first, no matter what?
I generally am when it comes to the draft.
Okay.
However, I don't think the Bengals will have that option available to them because of all the holes that are on the roster coming up. They've got a lot of money to play with. Maybe they proved me wrong, but, we're losing two receivers. We're losing a right tackle.
More than likely losing two receivers.
More than likely losing two receivers, a right tackle, and we have a defensive tackle hole that includes a run stopper, like a nose tackle, and just a penetrating three-tech. I think B.J. Hill's just not good enough. You need more there. You need more depth there. So for me, in order, it goes right tackle because we need offensive linemen that can be more athletic, can make a difference, then receiver, then that defensive tackle. I think those three are the biggest needs for this Bengals team right now at this very second.
Yeah, to answer the first question that Trace proposed, are you best player available? I think the circumstances create what you do, right? If the best cornerback in the draft falls to where the Bengals are, even though the Bengals might not desperately need a cornerback, how can you let that go?
Any position besides quarterback, to be clear.
Right, yeah. So cornerback, I said.
Okay, my bad.
Even though it's not a position you need, sometimes things like that fall in your lap and you're just like, okay, fine, yeah, we'll take this cornerback. But for the positions that the Bengals need to address, obviously the offensive line has been a revolving issue. Jonah Williams is going to need to be replaced at the right tackle, and then what's going to happen with T. Higgins is a big thing. We can franchise and trade him. Are we going to franchise him and just hopefully he plays and you just get one more year and watch him walk out the door next year? Tyler Boyd is seemingly gone. So in the first probably the first two rounds, the Bengals need to address a pass catcher, a weapon for Joe Burrow, someone to help Jamar Chase, whether that be a top tight end, whether that be another wide receiver. In the first two rounds, I would really like to see the Bengals go after a pass catcher. And then also, offensive line and as Casey said, interior defensive line, because it seems like though the secondary has had its issues, where they're going to go next year is just to let these guys develop because they use so much draft capital, because they spent money on the linebackers. It seems like we're going to be rocking with the same crop of people. That is Jordan Battle, Dax Hill, Cam Taylor, Britt. I think we're going to need another cornerback.
Yep.
Awuzie is probably going to be gone, but we do have DJ Turner. So, there's probably going to need to be some depth in the secondary that they'll address late in the draft. But in the first few rounds, certainly they need to get a pass catcher. Without a doubt, they need to get someone that Joe Burrow can throw the ball to help supplement at least Tyler Boyd, probably Tyler Boyd and T. Higgins. And then you're going to need to protect them, and you're going to need some run stoppers on the interior line. So that's how I would like the first 3 rounds to go. I
would go wide receiver or tight end, like Reed just said. And then I would also go, like Casey said, offensive line. And then immediately after that, defensive tackle.
Yeah.
At some point, and again, as bad as the secondary has been, a lot of the giant plays have been resulting of the broken play that C.J. Stroud, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, they break free, nobody's pressuring the quarterback, and then he has 15 seconds to chuck it up downfield where a receiver has inevitably broken free from coverage.
One of the good things that the Bengals have is versatility in the secondary. I know we kind of danced around the bush here and kind of pointed out that the secondary has not been good this year.
It's not been good. It's very young. It's very young.
I do think if the right guy at corner fell down to them, a for sure thing, just a guy that's not supposed to be there at corner, if it dropped down to them, he was going to be a shutdown corner, I think they would take him just to, one, bolster that side. I don't think they have a true shutdown corner as of yet.
Yeah.
I know Cam Taylor-Britt has showed some flashes, but I don't trust that just yet. I think he did a lot of improving, but I don't think there's anyone on that secondary that deserves to be given a pass. This guy is going to be a starter for sure. None of those guys have yet proved themselves, so I think they would take a chance on an all-star corner. But
to defend the secondary, out of the 4 secondary spots, the 2 safeties and the 2 cornerbacks that play on any given time, only one guy was a veteran. Only one guy this past year was a veteran, and that was Awuzie.
Yeah.
Dax Hill, even though it was his second year, didn't play at all last year. Jordan Battle, Cam Taylor-Britt. Cam Taylor-Britt played a little bit last year, probably played
towards the end
of a third of the season. So this is a very young secondary that they're probably just going to roll the dice with. Whether it's good or bad, they'll probably just roll the dice on those guys, continue to develop, because there is several second-round picks and several first-round picks in that secondary that they're like, listen, We've got to live with the drafts that we've made, and we've got to start addressing some other needs, or this team's gonna go in the tank early.
Yeah, usually when it comes to the draft, the bottom 16, they usually should just go BPA because they don't have the roster to necessarily compete just yet. Those are the guys that are outside the playoffs that are still trying to build up a roster. You just take BPA and move on with your day. Bengals are currently sitting at 16, right in the middle of the draft. They could be as high as 18, I think.
That's the highest that they can go. Yeah.
Or as low as 12. So they're in a tricky spot. Go ahead.
If we get a tackle, if we get a top tackle in the first round too, 12th pick or something like that, I'd be more than thrilled about that. If it's interior lineman, wouldn't excite me. But a tackle or a wide receiver in the first round would be great. And then in the second round, we can go opposite, get some depth late in the draft for the secondary and things along those natures. So I think it's pretty clear that it's weapons, tackle, interior linemen are the biggest needs.
Some of the names that are just out there for the Bengals: Dallas Turner, Alabama; J.C. Latham, tackle from Alabama; Cooper DeJean, corner from Iowa. He plays a little bit of safety as well. Leonard Taylor, a defensive tackle. Nate Wiggins, Clemson corner. Those are just some names to think about at the current moment. None of this is set in stone yet either.
I was gonna say,
the names thing, we don't know their RAS scores, which I'm a big fan of. We don't know how they're gonna perform Senior Bowl, or maybe they
A lot of time.
already
A lot of time to talk about
Every
this.
single year, the NFL draft has a situation where someone falls. Someone falls. And
Miles Murphy.
That was my point, is that the Bengals, if you told them they were going to draft Miles Murphy before the draft started, they would have never believed that in a million years. And that's where the whole, obviously, the rankings of what the Bengals perceive to have value is the area in which I always keep pushing back on this organization and saying that needs to be a little bit better, because I think the best draft strategy that there is, and I think it's one in which pretty much every team almost operates within. Maybe a few teams don't. But I would think that you would have a set list of guys and you have a set grade of positions. And you know there's certain positions where you feel good about the depth at that certain position versus other positions. And if you realize and you feel like there's only 2 real tackles in the draft that you think have a can't-miss grade on, and one of them fall to you, then you rather take that, even though you might not believe that's the best player available, over top of a defensive back, to where you have 9 guys graded at about the same level, and you feel like you can get one of those other guys in another round. It all comes to perceived value. And that's where this Bengals team finds themselves in, is where is the perceived value and what positions are most important, and how big of a hole really is it? The secondary we have discussed all year long about how it's been a little bit of an issue, yes. But they've already put an investment there.
Correct.
And you have to trust that your evaluation a year, 2 years ago is going to be right when those guys get themselves firmly in the league. Next year, you'd like to think that a lot of these young guys will take a step forward and they won't be the holes that they were perceived to be now. The area in which you cannot miss on, and we discussed this yesterday, is you just can't miss, period. To me, guys, don't believe that it's, and I know I asked the question, tackle, I'm not bought in on the wide receiver thing. We'll discuss that in just a second. But between a tackle and a defensive tackle, I don't think it makes that big of a difference on either one. You just have to get it right. You can't miss again. And I'm not saying Miles Murphy's 100% a swing and a miss. But for every Miles Murphy, and I know the complete opposite is a Micah Parsons. And I'm not suggesting you need to find Micah Parsons, because that's maybe a diamond in the rough type situation. But you got to hit. And that is going to be something in which I think this front office is going to be held to a high standard, because you can only go up to the plate so many times before the honeymoon wears off. You've seen it with Ellie De La Cruz if you want to jump over positions. Everybody loved Ellie. And then all of a sudden, struggle, and then it kind of wore itself off. I'm just saying that this is the front office's most important draft, because if they miss on a couple of these guys, all hell's going to break loose. And there's going to be some tough questions to be asked. How many other franchises in the National Football League? Now, they're going to ruin it because they're going to go out and beat Cleveland this weekend, and they're going to dispel what I'm getting ready to say. But how many other NFL organizations do you think that there are where you could go winless in your division, not win a single game, and nobody loses their job? Not a single person. Status quo, keep it moving, everything is good around here. I don't know if there's another one, if we're being honest. Now, I'm not saying that's the right move or the wrong move, totally. I get why the Bengals are in the position they're in, because they have guys that they've had there before and they've had extreme success with. The one thing that's tough about a bad organization, or bad's the wrong word to use, one thing that's tough about an organization that's not won championships or has a history of winning championships, is that when you have a group of people finally get you somewhere, you feel indebted to them maybe more than you should. I am not on the bandwagon of firing Zach Taylor.
Nope.
But I am on the bandwagon of looking behind the door and asking yourself, who is it that needs to make an adjustment? Maybe we're over-accentuating of what Frank Pollard does, or whether or not the offensive line coach matters. But something has to change if it doesn't work out. Something does. Doesn't mean that it's the right move, but if nothing else, if you're a culture type of person, I think it at least sends a message that this is a business. This is professional sports. If you can't get the job done, someone else is going to try to find a way to get it done for you. So what that looks like, I don't know yet. But I do think it's the most important draft that Duke Tobin's had. And I think if you're going to draft an offensive lineman, if Frank Pollard's still here, he better pray to God that guy is a starter week 1 in the NFL. If it's a first-round type of talent. Am I wrong on that? Elliot, do you think that that's asking too much?
No. And again, I know Joe Burrow said that the window is his career, and I agree with that. If you have the quarterback, you have the guy. But to have the quarterback, you have to keep him upright. You have to hit on the offensive line. They haven't. Trace has pointed that out. It seems to me like next year in general, maybe not even just the draft, maybe just next year as a whole, it's going to be arguably the biggest year we've had yet. And that's because we are going to see what this offense looks like without the big three, T. Higgins, Tyler Boyd, and Jamar Chase. We'll probably have 2 of them, probably, if T plays under the franchise tag. If we don't have him, we're going to have somebody else, right? So it's going to be interesting to see how the offense evolves with all that's going on. And that's not even to mention that Joe Burrow, unfortunately, has kind of been injury prone, right? It's hard to avoid that topic.
He has been injury prone. People like dance around that. He's fully been injury prone.
And again, I don't think sometimes it's not a negative, right? I know when you say they're injury prone, it's usually with a negative connotation. I get that. But to his credit, he's been rocked back there. I think that's a fair assessment. I think in the Super Bowl when he's being sacked 8 times, it's hard to do your job as a quarterback. If you're going to hit on a talent, it has to be right now, because it seems to me, and I could be wrong, it seems like the little burst of window we had here, it seems like it's just getting smaller. And again, I'm the first one to say next year it's a very easy schedule. I think next year could be the year we win a Super Bowl. I said it this year. We got hurt. I'll talk about it on Box Lunch, but arguably the Bengals had the 5th hardest schedule, not of just this season, not of the last 10 years, but arguably the 5th hardest schedule of all time in the NFL. And that's based on something I'll show you on Box Lunch. So this season I'm not going to put too much into it. It happens. It's the NFL. But next year we're going to need to see some progress. You have to. You just paid him $275 million. We're not going to have T. Higgins or Tyler Boyd. Joe Mixon's most likely gone. The defense is getting torched. Offensive line, you just paid one guy to be the highest offensive lineman and the highest paid offensive lineman in the league. You have to see some development there. I have hope on the Bengals. I have hope. But to Trace's point, it starts with the draft. And if you can't draft well, what do you really have?
Yeah, I got really nothing to add. The only thing I will say is Trace brought up that if they go winless in the division, will there be moves made? If the Titans don't win this year, then they'll go winless. And I don't think Mike Vrabel is going to go anywhere. I don't think Mike Vrabel is going to lose his job. We all know he's a very good coach.
It's not the head coach. I'm talking about the head coach. There's
Okay.
other moves that have to be made at some point if nobody can get the job done.
That's fair. Listen. We put a lot of injuries, really tough schedule. Not copacetic with a winning recipe, especially when your best player was not at full for anything but 5 games. But it's the NFL. That happens. It happens every single year to a multitude of teams. You just hope it doesn't happen to you. Being healthy is the number one recipe for success in the NFL. It's the number one thing. You got to be healthy.
No doubt.
So if you can't be healthy, unless you're the Baltimore Ravens, you're probably not going to have a good time, because the Baltimore Ravens seem to be hurt all season long, every single year. And when they have Lamar Jackson back there, they look at the best team in the league. Is this the most important draft in Bengals history? I had this thought a couple days ago that next year is going to be the legacy. Like, it could be what we look at in the rearview mirror for like a legacy of Zach Taylor. Not so much Joe Burrow, but like Zach Taylor. And I'm very pro Zach Taylor. I think he's a very good coach. Like, I really do. What he's done, if they go 9-8 this year with everything that's happened, he deserves kudos for that. Not negative reviews. And if they can't find themselves in the postseason next year, then yeah, I'll take back what I said about Zach Taylor. It's a very tough division. It's a very tough conference. But yeah, all these things. Now, Trace, We've got 10 minutes left, and it sounds like you're about to make a point. I'll let you make that point.
Yep.
But for 2 days now, 4 hours of this show, we've been trying to get our Power 5 and our picks in from last week.
Yep.
With this last 10 minutes.
You think I'm going to let you do that?
We would like to get them in.
All right. Well, we might go overtime for a second because I've seen the comments. I've seen the rave reviews. I've seen some of the chats. I see some of the posts after the fact. Certainly Van Jones certainly wants to talk about it. No one else gives a rat's tail about it, but here you go. Here's your 3 minutes of fame. Kentucky basketball. Some people want us to talk about that. I don't know what there is to talk about, but I'll talk about it. Why not? Kentucky basketball. For those that are wondering, they're winning basketball games this year. Do you want to know who they've beaten? I'll tell you. New Mexico State, Texas A&M Commerce, Stonehill, St. Joseph's, Marshall, Miami. The same Miami team, by the way, that lost to 30 to Colorado. UNC Wilmington, Pennsylvania. They did beat North Carolina, by the way. North Carolina, just so you know, they have 3 losses this year.
They lost to UNC Wilmington at home.
Well, I mean, I wasn't going to bring up that they lost to UNC Wilmington at home, but you did, so there it is. They did beat Pennsylvania, and they did beat Louisville, and they did beat Illinois State. Fantastic. Until they do something of relevancy, I'm not talking about it. And no one cares about it yet.
Cal.
Coach,
now,
you did it
I'm
wrong.
not saying they can't be good. I'm not saying they can't be great.
Dallas Cowboys of college basketball.
But do you think for a second on January 3rd, 2 days removed from basically maybe the biggest football weekend there was in sports, we haven't even talked about really Ohio State. We haven't talked about whether Ryan Day should lose his job. We haven't talked about what is it that Ryan Day has to do to keep his job. Is Ryan Day on the hot seat? I asked that last year. Everybody made fun of me. I think it's pretty apt to ask. Is he on the hot seat? But let's talk about Kentucky basketball's big win over Illinois State on December 29th.
Trace is a big Kentucky fan. 2 years ago, they beat the ever-living brakes off of Kansas, if I recall. And Trace came in, and he said, listen, this team is the best team in college basketball. That day, he put a future on Kentucky to win it all.
Yeah, I did. I thought they were great. And what did they do, Reed? What did they do? What did Kentucky basketball do when I thought they were the best team in the country? You want me to remind you?
I'll tell you.
I'll tell you right now. They played a team that goes over here, this elementary school right on the west side of Hamilton called St. Peter's, and they lost to them. They didn't just lose to them. They got the brakes beat off of them. So until they do anything of relevancy, I'm not talking about them, okay?
They lost in overtime.
Don't ask me again. Don't ask me again. And yeah, Van Jones is going to hate my guts for saying it. They're not worth talking about until they do something. All right. I digress. You guys want to do picks? Do you think you can get your picks done in time?
Well, yeah.
Or would you rather do the top 5?
We're going to recap them, then we're going to do our top 5 to round out the show. So the first game that we did was in college football. I think this was one of the best college football. As a hater of college football, that was like a top 10 college football day of my lifetime. Top 5 maybe even. And that was the semifinals and everything. So this is how we picked the Michigan-Alabama game. Elliot and Tom are losers. Big old fat losers. Losers. Michigan won. Go blue.
They cheated, though. So
They do cheat.
I hate that narrative.
Go blue.
Well, they did. It's not debatable. They did.
But they've not cheated to win this national championship. They've had to beat everybody.
Well, it
fair
hasn't
and
been-
I think it's the most overblown
100%.
college football scandal.
Do you think it's more
ever.
overblown than the inflated footballs that Tom Brady was supposedly throwing around, and that's why they won? Or do you think that one was right there with it?
Pretty insane. Pretty close. Pretty close.
Imagine thinking that the Patriots only won a football game because Tom Brady was throwing deflated footballs.
I want to make it very clear. I had money on Alabama, so that's the only reason I say they cheated.
Jolly. St. Peter's fish fry was a happening back in the day. Any Catholic school fish fries. We're getting to that season. It's great. All right, second game.
We are. It's pretty cold outside.
We had Texas. We were losers. I'll give Tom credit. He's been on the Huskies all year long. He really has. The Huskies were the victim of the most disrespectful line in I think betting history when they were undefeated and 10-point underdogs to Oregon, and they beat the brakes off them. And Washington's looked very good.
Yeah,
we were wrong with our
man.
hook'ems. We were wrong with our hook'ems.
He gave credit to their offensive line, and they did just enough to give Penix enough time to make the throws. So
Right, that's true.
congrats.
That's true. All right, well, we move to the National Football League. I was the big old dummy. I, for some reason, really like the Titans, and that wasn't even close. I don't like the Texans because after we lost to the Texans, everyone was telling me that the Texans were going to win the Super Bowl, and yeah, I don't know. I gotta see more from the Texans, but they might make the postseason. They got to win this
step
week.
closer.
Yeah.
That's
So
that Dan Campbell spite you got.
it is.
Do you think Dan Campbell would have went for it on 4th and goal from the 25 if they just kept getting like a personal foul penalty here? Like, at what point does Dan Campbell's just pissed. And if you didn't see it, by the way, I don't mean to jump off topic here really quickly, but if you didn't see it, please go back and watch his interview. He basically was like, the reporter said to him, did you ever reconsider maybe, kicking the field goal, going for it when you were backed up to the 8-yard line? And he goes, what do you mean? He's like, well, you got backed up. He goes, I told my guys we were going to go down the field. We were scoring a touchdown. We were going for 2, and we were going to win the game. And we did. And we were going to do that.
He had a radio interview yesterday, and he was talking to the host, and they were making fun of him for it. And they were and basically they were kind of beating around the bush, and they were like, that's kind of a strange call. And Campbell said to them, why don't you say it like you mean it? Why don't you say what you mean? And they're like, I think that was a terrible call. And then he said, where would the line have been? If they would have pushed you to the 15, would you have gone for it? And he said, at least in this radio interview, no. The statute of limitations stopped at the 10-yard line, apparently.
Okay.
But it's still nonsense.
Here's a question: do those penalties tack on to the PAT? Like, if you then decide, like, if they would have had a false start like they had, so they back them up to the 7, and then they have a holding, and they're back to the 17, and you go, all right, now we want to kick it. Do they tack on those 15 yards to the kick?
I do think so.
Yes,
so now you're kicking a 50-yard PAT.
Well, there's
like, you have a better
I get
shot
what you're
at
saying,
that.
but they're kicking indoors, perfect conditions.
I get it. I'm just saying, like, it would have been at some point if the penalties surmise. Would you rather kick a 55-yard PAT for 1 point, or would you rather go for 2 from the 17 or something like that?
No, I bet well, I know one thing: the analytical crowd, they'd be all over that. That's a wet dream for their scenarios. They'd be all about telling you which one's the better of the two. I'll be honest with you, I could care less which of the two is. It's both bad situations, but I'd kick it. Go ahead.
More NFL games. Yeah, Elliot was right on. Speaking of Dan Campbell, good call, Elliot. Good call. We had the Cowboys at home. They've been very, very good at home, and they're going to get to play at home at least for a game in the postseason. So maybe 2. So congratulations to the Cowboys winning that game. What a weird ending of that game was. We then go on to Steelers, Seahawks. Seahawks, why couldn't you help us out here one time? Come on, big fella.
Tough.
I mean, golly day.
I mean, that was just a hope pick, right? I mean,
that was all hope. I mean, the Steelers are crossing that Brewers threshold where we just disrespected the Brewers literally all season long. And we've disrespected the Steelers all season long, despite it's actually very similar because you remember the Brewers beat the tails off the Reds and still just so much disrespect towards the Brewers. The Steelers have beaten the crap out of the Bengals now twice, and we're still like the Steelers are terrible. Steelers are terrible. All right. We then go Casey Reed. You want to defend this one? At what point do you give the Ravens credit? Because you have not given the Ravens credit one time.
And I won't. I'll continue to not give them credit. Dolphins, they are frauds, aren't they? They just got blown out by a real team. Yeah, I mean, it just kind of snowballed, right? I mean, Ravens really pounce on momentum, and they just roll with it. And that's what happened.
Yeah, the Dolphins almost beat the Ravens almost beat the Dolphins by the same difference as the Dolphins beat the Broncos that we still talk about 15 weeks later.
Yeah.
Yep.
Almost
something about 70 points.
Yeah. They put up 56.
I'm just saying that's why.
And I begrudgingly got this one right. I was betting against my heart, and I got this one. So,
Bengals were the right side of that, though. I feel like I know you.
Yeah, they probably played better for the majority of the game. Just offense stalled out a little bit. They didn't kick.
Well, it was not kicking a field goal.
Yeah, I mean, like I said this yesterday. Like, I obviously wasn't watching it on a 70-inch screen. I was watching it on a phone in the back of a church for the majority of the game. And I just kept turning to people. I was like, how many times are they going to let us roll out and get 15 yards, and either by running or throwing? Like, at what point is that play not going to work?
Did you say any prayers when you were there or no?
I did say some prayers. I said a lot of prayers. All right. That was our picks. So
can we do Reed's top 5 tomorrow?
Josh Nutcutter.
I have.
Thank you, Josh.
Let's go, Josh.
Appreciate you.
I got a present for Josh. Can we do a quick mailbag, please?
Of course.
Casey?
Let's just go overtime for Josh.
And I do have a cherry on top, a very quick cherry on top as well.
We just got a letter. We just got a letter. We just got a letter. I wonder who it's from.
Well, hi everybody. Listen, it's your favorite segment. It's the mailbag. Again, if you're new to the program, so what we do is we collect letters from all around the world. They send them right here to Hamilton, Ohio, and I receive them and I look at them and I pick the best one. Today's mailbag comes from sweet little Jimmy from Mrs. Kimmel's class. Christmas break is over and Jimmy just flew back into town and is ready to begin a new year. He's a big fan of the Xavier Musketeers. Xavier has a massive game against Villanova tonight, but Xavier is only 4-17 against Villanova all time, and this seems like a must-win game to keep the season alive. Jimmy has never seen a Final Four and wants to know, is this game tonight for Xavier their Super Bowl? What do you have to say, guys?
Well, it ought to be, and they should take solace in the fact that they're 8.5-point dogs. So good luck to them. It does stink. Can I say that? Very, very, very clearly. It does stink that we have two basketball teams in our town that have had very, very good, notable history. I mean, Xavier and UC, for all intents and purposes, Xavier has some history too, though. Let's not act like it.
The last 20 years have been one of the best programs.
And what's it matter? That's kind of where I would say, if you want to talk about history, it would be more apt to discuss the fact that Xavier has had better success than even UC, even though UC, over the longest form of history, it's better.
You said it, not me.
I'm just saying that in our lifetimes, I'm the type of person that would rather root for a team that's been better in my lifetime, in worse over the course of the entire history, than the opposite.
You said it, not me.
I know. I did say it. But it is a shame.
It is a shame
that we have two teams in this city that have what you would like to think good basketball programs, and neither one of them are going to make the tournament. I don't think that either one of them stand a chance to make the tournament, and I hope I'm wrong about that. But very clearly it was apparent that Xavier wasn't good towards the beginning of the season. And then when Xavier played UC, it became apparent that UC wasn't good either. So I don't know what the rest of this year holds for either of those teams. But you want to talk about a debate for another day. I don't know who's gonna have a more pivotal season next year between Wes Miller and Ryan Day. Those two guys are going to have a seesaw season. And what I mean by a seesaw, it can go either way. If they have a great season, hey, the ship has been righted, all is well in the world, and we continue on, and they might go on to have a hell of a career at wherever they're at right now, whether it be UC or Ohio State for them respectively. But if it were to go the opposite way, I think it's very, very, very clear that both of those could obviously see the door. That's how fine the margin is in sports.
I think what you're trying to say about the Xavier UC thing is, and I'm not trying to take words out of your mouth.
Please do if you need to.
I think what you're trying to say.
What am I trying to say?
Is that over the past 20 years, Xavier has been to 3 Elite Eights and 8 Sweet 16s, while UC has been to 0 Elite Eights and only 1 Sweet 16. I think that's what you're trying to say, but I'm not going to take the words out of your mouth.
I think that is what he was trying to say. Casey, let's run the quick cherry on top.
And here we go.
Quick little cherry.
A quick cherry?
A quick little treat.
A treat.
So Nick Kirby was talking about Jonathan India being a star outfielder, and this video will cement it. This guy's got an absolute hose. This is a routine play to third base. And he sends it into the second deck. Look at this.
That's a good arm. Just miscalculated it.
Now, here's what's going to happen. He's going to be in left field, presumably, and he's just going to gun guys down at home. That's what you have to look forward to, Reds fans. That is our Left fielder, Jonathan India. Leader of men.
One question I'll wrap up because we go over and we're not the radio station, so we can do that. We can go over as long as we want.
Yeah, and we don't have nonsense commercials for
right. We don't have that. But baseball fans are so funny. That clip just reminded me, just seeing the Nets down the line over the past 10 years. Think about all of the things that baseball fans have pushed back against that just don't matter. Like, for the longest time, DHs in the National League's an abomination. Then we get it, and everyone's like, yeah, that was fine. Like, got over it, like, in 2 months. Oh, pitch clocks are an abomination. What are we doing that? Yeah, I mean, we got over it in about six days. Oh, we can't have Nets down the line. How are you're going to obstruct my view? We got over it literally the day that they put them in. It's just funny that baseball fans push. And, like, literally the second that it's implemented, you get over it.
I do feel like that's most sports fans. One thing I want to say to end this show is that, yes, we are thankful. If you want to become a member, it's very, very much appreciated. It's one of the small things that helps keep this ship afloat, if we're being quite honest. So for all of you that became a member, we very much appreciate you. We're also trying to find little fun ways to basically boost up and make it worth membership. So we probably are going to run a sale on merch at some point that ultimately I don't want to say we'll give the stuff away for free to a certain extent, but that's probably what it'll end up being. You can always like this show specifically, but more importantly, if you don't mind, if you've not subscribed to our channel, we're right on the precipice of getting to 11,000. I'd like to get that done. That would be cool. So if you've not subscribed, please subscribe, hit the notification bell. We come your way every single day, Monday through Friday from 10 to 12. And until then, we will see you tomorrow.
I must admit, I didn't think much of this show the first time I laid eyes on it. Seemed like a bunch of stiffs wasting nice
Worst
microphones.
trade of all time happened back in 1803.